My name is Megan, and I'm a 20-year-old university student from Texas. My parents divorced when I was 10, and since then, I've been living with my mom. Last year, I faced one of the most challenging moments of my life. My father passed away after a battle with cancer. We were incredibly close, and his death was a huge blow. In his will, he left me a significant amount of money, but I could only access it once I turned 20. This year, when I finally turned 20, something unexpected and unbelievable happened. My stepdad, Paul, who's in his mid-30s and has been married to my mom for 3 years, called me into his room. We've never had the best relationship, but I've always tried to be polite and civil with him, even though he hasn't always treated me well. During this conversation, Paul brought up the money my dad had left me. He said I should give it to my stepbrother, Charles, because he needed it for his college education. Charles wanted to attend university, just like me, and Paul thought it was only fair that I hand over my inheritance to help him out. I was stunned. I couldn't believe that Paul was actually asking me to give away the money that my father had left specifically for me. I told him, "Paul, I don't think I can do that. This money was left to me by my dad. What if I need it in the future?" But Paul wasn't having it. He dismissed my concerns, saying, "Don't be ridiculous, Megan. You don't need that money, and even if you do, Charles needs it more." I stood my ground and replied firmly, "I'm sorry, but the answer is no." This made Paul angry. He warned me, "Megan, don't push me." Trying to stay calm, I told him, "There's no need to get angry. I'm just being honest. Saying no isn't about disrespecting you. It's about setting boundaries. I'm standing up for myself, and if that makes you mad, then maybe you need to think about your attitude. Remember, Paul, you're a guest in this house too, so let's try to be civil." Before he could say anything else, I walked out. His behavior didn't surprise me at all, given how he's acted in the past. I had a feeling he would eventually try to get his hands on that money. You might be wondering where my mom was during all of this. Well, that's a whole other story. My mom seems to be blind to Paul's flaws and stands by him no matter what, almost like she's under a spell. She loves me, but I've tried not to ruin her perception of him, so I've always done my best to get along with Paul for her sake. It's strange how, despite being one of the youngest in the house, I feel like I have to be the most responsible and level-headed one. I often found myself having to be the most mature person in the house, even though I was the youngest. My mom, Teresa, was out of town during this whole ordeal, which is why she wasn't there to witness it. If she had been, I'm sure she would have been furious with Paul. That's probably why he thought he could push me around while she was away. But what he didn't realize was that I was fully aware of his sneaky intentions. After I walked out of the room, Paul followed me, scolding me and accusing me of being a bad sister because I refused to give the money to Charles. His accusation was far from the truth. I do care about Charles and want to help him, but not by giving up the money my dad left for me. It felt like Paul was just trying to manipulate me into doing what he wanted. When people say, like father, like son, they might as well be talking about Paul and Charles. These two troublemakers reminded me of Pinky and the brain you can decide who's who based on what happened next. As I continued to walk away, Paul shouted after me, "Hey, don't walk away while I'm talking to you. You need to listen and do what's right." I turned back to him and asked, "Can you give me a good reason why I should?" Before he could respond, Charles, who had been woken up by our arguing, joined the conversation. "What's going on with you two? Your arguing woke me up," he said. Paul quickly jumped in. "Charles, tell Megan what we talked about earlier." Charles hesitated for a moment before saying, "Sure. What was it again?" "Oh, right, the inheritance money. Yeah, Megan, Dad, and I were talking, and we need that money for something important." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean for your college tuition?" Paul interrupted, trying to steer the conversation back on track. "Yeah, that's right. It's for your university, Charles." Charles nodded, clearly confused. "Oh, yeah, I completely forgot. I just woke up, you know. Yes, it's for university. I want to attend, and I need the money for myself." I couldn't help but smirk at how poorly rehearsed their act was. Well, that's a cute attempt, but not cute enough. The answer is still no. Charles protested. "Why not, Megan? I know what I want, and this isn't up for discussion. We're getting that money. We'll see about that, I replied calmly, though the tension in the room was thick. The rest of the evening was filled with awkward silence. Paul was known for his silly pranks and attempts to get under my skin, but this was different. It was a deliberate effort to manipulate me, and I wasn't going to let it slide. As much as I wanted to tell my mom what was happening, I decided to handle the situation on my own for now. I wanted to keep dealing with Paul and Charles directly, especially after I realized how far they were willing to go. Megan, stop playing around. You need to be a grown-up and do the right thing, Paul said, trying to sound authoritative. I couldn't help but scoff. And the right thing is giving away my money? Are you serious, Paul? Just wait until I tell Mom. His reaction was immediate and unexpected. Don't tell Teresa anything, he snapped. Why not? She's my mom. She deserves to know how I'm being treated. Paul's tone shifted to one of false concern. You think she cares? Listen, I'm just trying to help you. If you bring this up to her, she'll only get upset with you for wasting her time and being selfish. I looked him straight in the eye and said, Well, Paul, that's a risk I'm willing to take. His angry tone surprised me as he growled, I'm warning you, don't tell your mother. At that moment, I realized just how desperate and manipulative he was. But I wasn't about to back down. This was my life, my money, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even Paul, push me around. I had never seen Paul so worked up, especially over something like this. It was clear that something was going on, especially with that business idea Charles accidentally mentioned. They must think I'm not smart enough to catch on, and Paul's strong reaction to me talking to my mom only made me more suspicious. As soon as I could, I went to talk to my mom. Hey, Mom, how are you doing? I'm good, baby. How about you? She replied warmly. Not very well, Mom. Something's off with Paul and Charles, especially Paul. He's acting weirder than usual, I said, trying to sound calm. Oh, Megan, don't be paranoid. I know you don't really like him, but he's not weird, she responded, trying to reassure me. Mom, he asked me for the inheritance money, I said, getting straight to the point. What? Really? She asked, surprised. Actually, he demanded the money. Both he and Charles, I clarified, hoping she'd see how serious this was. That's not true. He wouldn't do that, she said, clearly in disbelief. I know you love him, Mom, for whatever reason, but this is true. He said it's for Charles's education, but I think something fishy is going on. He even got pretty aggressive when I told him I'd tell you what he said to me. I explained, trying to make her see the situation from my perspective. I don't know, baby. I just feel like I need more proof, she said, still hesitant. Don't worry, I'll get all the proof you need. Just wait and see, I promised her. Even though my mom wasn't ready to fully believe me yet, I was determined to uncover what was really going on. I kept telling myself that man had put some kind of spell on her. Later that night, I decided to do some digging. I used the family computer and found something shocking. It looked like Paul had forgotten to log out of his email account, his mistake. What I found was more than concerning. Paul had been exchanging emails with a woman named Maria, and they were far from friendly. It looked like he was having an affair. I took careful notes on what I discovered, but what I found next was even more disturbing. The emails discussed Paul divorcing my mom and running away with Maria. They mentioned getting a large sum of money soon for some kind of business, but from what I read, it seemed shady. While Paul wasn't stupid enough to put anything illegal in his emails, he was dumb enough to have an affair and forget to log out of his account. I knew I needed more information, so the next day, I decided to see if I could get anything out of Charles. I made sure to record our conversation on my phone. Hey, Charles, I greeted him casually. Hello, Megan, he replied, sounding unusually cheerful. You seem happy today, I noted, trying to ease into the conversation. Why not? It's a beautiful day, he said, clearly in a good mood. I have some questions for you. I began. I've been thinking about what you and Paul said, and I'm considering giving you the money. Really? That's great. I'll let him know, Charles responded excitedly. Not so fast, I stopped him. Before I give you this money, it is for your college, right? Oh, yeah, right. My college tuition, he stammered, clearly caught off guard. Yes, right, I said, pretending to go along with it. I needed more information, and I could tell Charles was the weak link in their plan. I needed to be sure you were serious about getting this money, I said, my tone firm. Yes, I'm very serious, Charles replied quickly, though I could sense some nervousness. Are you sure? And what about Maria? Is she serious too? I asked, watching his reaction closely. Maria? Who's Maria? Charles stammered, clearly caught off guard. Oh, she's, a student advisor for the college, he quickly added, but I knew something was off. Before I could press further, Paul suddenly walked into the room. The tension immediately skyrocketed. I don't appreciate you interrogating my son, he said, his voice cold. I wasn't interrogating him, I replied, trying to stay calm. I was just asking how my money would be used. Well, once you give someone money, it's not yours anymore, so it's not your business, Paul shot back. Is that any way to speak to someone who's thinking of giving you money? I asked, my patience wearing thin. You're not thinking, you're giving me that money. If you don't, I'll kick you out, Paul threatened. I was stunned, and so was Charles. Dad, this wasn't part of, Charles began, but Paul cut him off sharply. Shut up. I'm the parent and I make the rules. If you don't give me that inheritance money, you can leave, Paul barked. I decided to keep quiet, but little did Paul know, I was still recording the entire conversation. I had caught him in the act. Without another word, I walked out of the room, giving Paul an angry look, and locked myself in my bedroom. Once inside, I began collecting all the evidence I had against him. It felt like I was one of those detectives on TV, gathering clues and piecing everything together. I had voice recordings, screenshots of Paul's emails with Maria, and every detail I could find. I knew a storm was coming, and I was ready. After organizing everything, I called my mom. Hello, Mom. Hey, love, how are you? She answered. Mom, are you sitting down? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Why? What's wrong? She asked, immediately concerned. I'm afraid I have some really bad news to share and you won't like it, I said, bracing myself for her reaction. I started telling her everything I had discovered. At first, she was in denial, refusing to believe it. But then I made her listen to the audio recording of Paul's threats. That's when she started to break down. Why would he say those things to you? Why would he do that to me? Why would he be so cruel? She asked, her voice shaking. Because he's a bad man, Mom. I'm sorry to say it, but you married a monster, I replied gently. This is just terrible. I can't believe I left you alone with those two sickos, she said, her voice filled with regret. Absolutely not. I'm coming home right now. You stay where you are. Have you locked your door? She asked urgently. Yes, ma'am, I replied. I'm going to ruin that man and make sure he never shows his face in public again. When I'm done with him, he'll wish he never married me, she vowed. That's the spirit, Mom. Now hurry up and get home. We need to make a plan, I said, feeling a sense of relief knowing she was on her way. My mom arrived several hours later and came straight to my room. We hugged and cried together for what felt like hours. The bond between us had never been stronger, and we both knew that no matter what happened next, we would face it together. I could tell the news was hard for my mom to hear, but I was relieved that she had moved into the anger stage. Her anger fueled her to take action, and that was exactly what we needed. We talked for hours, and by the end of our conversation, we had a solid plan in place. A few days passed, and Paul seemed puzzled by my mom's sudden return from her work trip. He couldn't understand why she was home early, or why she was giving him the cold shoulder. He put on an overly cheerful front, trying too hard to convince her of his innocence. But my mom wasn't fooled. She saw right through his act and was preparing to kick him out. After I showed her the suspicious messages about his so-called business, my mom decided to hire a private investigator. She had a strong suspicion that the money wasn't going to be used for anything legal, and that made her furious. She couldn't comprehend how a parent could be so deceitful and cruel. We both knew this situation was too big for us to handle alone. 5 days later, the private investigator shared his findings with my mom, who then sat me down to tell me everything. I'm speechless, I said, trying to process what she had just told me. Well, it turns out he's planning to use a laundromat for money laundering. It's an old trick, she explained. Wow, that's shocking. But there's more, isn't there? I asked, sensing that the worst was yet to come. Yes, there's more, she continued, her voice filled with disbelief. This woman, Maria, the one he's cheating on me with, has a criminal record. She's been arrested multiple times for drug-related activities. It wouldn't be surprising if their business involves drugs too. That's unbelievable. I never would have expected this. It's like a veil has been lifted from my eyes. The man you married isn't a man at all, he's a sick and twisted person, I said, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. When are we going to confront him, Mom? I asked, ready to take the next step.
Right now.
Follow my lead, she replied, her determination clear. Wait, let me get my camera, I said, grabbing my phone. We walked into the living room and found Charles and Paul deep in conversation, discussing their shady business plans. And then we'll use this as a cover for our business. It's all going to be hidden, just act like you don't know anything and serve the customers, okay?
Paul was saying.
But what about, Charles started to ask, but then they noticed us. Oh, hey everyone, we're just finalizing stuff for Charles's college application, Paul said, trying to play it off. Cut the act, Paul. The game is up. We know everything, my mom said firmly. What do you mean? Paul asked, his smile fading. Your innocent act won't work anymore, I added, holding up my phone. Smile for the camera. Get that out of my face, you spoiled brat, I mean Megan, Paul snapped, his true colors showing. We know everything, Paul. Do you realize how many years you could spend in jail for planning these crimes? My mom asked, her voice cold and resolute. The confrontation was intense, and as Paul's facade crumbled, the reality of his actions began to sink in. My mom and I had the evidence we needed, and there was no way he could talk his way out of this. I don't know what you're talking about, Paul stammered, trying to maintain his composure. Maybe we should call Maria and see what she has to say, I suggested, pushing him further. You two think you know everything, Paul sneered. Maria is just a friend. Well, the explicit photos suggest otherwise, I shot back. Who even uses emails to cheat nowadays? It's so dumb. Paul's face reddened with anger. You went through my things? How dare you? No, Paul. My mom cut in, her voice full of rage. How dare you? How dare you threaten my daughter multiple times, trying to take money that doesn't belong to you? How dare you threaten to kick her out of my house? Are you sick in the head? How dare you involve your son in your foolish schemes, putting him at risk? And how dare you plan to use that money for illegal activities? Now you've got nothing to say, huh? We know everything, and we're going to take you down. Get that camera out of my face, Paul shouted, his voice trembling with fury. He suddenly lunged at me, but I was too quick for him, dodging out of the way. His aggressive behavior was terrifying. You want to attack my daughter? It's like you're asking to go to prison, my mom said, her voice steady despite the situation. You think you know everything, but you know nothing. Yeah, well, tell that to the police, who should be here any second now, I added confidently. Police? Paul's voice faltered. Yes, the police, my mom confirmed. Your behavior today just sealed your fate. At that moment, we heard police sirens approaching. I had never seen Paul look like that before. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by a look of pure terror. All the color drained from his face. Please, Teresa, you don't have to do this. I can explain everything, Paul pleaded, his bravado completely gone. Save it for the judge, you cockroach, my mom snapped. You disgust me. And Charles, don't think you're off the hook. Both of you are getting arrested. Maybe this will teach you a lesson about mistreating my daughter and me. I know you're a kid, Charles, but you're old enough to know better, and for that, you need to be punished. Yes, Mom, Charles muttered, looking down. Come on, Rachel. Paul tried one last time. Don't you think this is a bit too much? On the contrary, it's not enough, my mom replied coldly. How's our live stream, Megan? We've got over 2,850 people watching, I said, holding up my phone. This is going to be big. Oh, and in case it wasn't clear, my mom added, her voice dripping with contempt, I want a divorce. That's right, over 2,850 people witnessed the entire mess live, and it didn't take long for the news to spread to local newspapers and tabloids. It was surreal to be in the middle of it all, dealing with my sick ex-stepfather and his son. But in the end, it was incredibly satisfying to see Paul's downfall. He lost everything: his job, his friends, and even some family members who no longer want anything to do with him. He's now facing serious charges for all his schemes, and if the judge decides, he could spend up to 22 years in prison. The police also tracked down Maria, who had been hiding when everything started unraveling. She's facing the same charges as Paul. On our side, life was good. The whole situation brought my mom and me closer together. On weekends, we'd often sit on the patio, drinks in hand, and laugh about how foolish and evil Paul had been. Good riddance, indeed. I'm Sandra, a 28-year-old software developer living in Seattle with my parents, Susan and James. My life has been a complex mix of challenges and responsibilities, and the story I'm about to share is a reflection of that. After college, I struggled to find a stable job. I was eager to make a mark in the world, but the job market was unforgiving. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a freelance software development opportunity that things started to change. I began working from home, earning around $2,000 a month at first. The income was modest, but it provided me with a sense of purpose and control. As I gained more experience and took on larger projects, my earnings grew to a steady $5,000 a month. I was proud of my progress, and it allowed me to contribute significantly to my family's finances. However, living with my parents was not without its struggles. My mother, Susan, was very traditional and skeptical about my work-from-home job. Despite my explanations about remote work, she never seemed to fully grasp its legitimacy. "Sandra, how can you make so much money without leaving the house?" she'd ask. She was always worried that my job was not real and often hinted that I might be involved in something dubious. No matter how many emails from clients or salary statements I showed her, Susan remained doubtful. The tension between us grew as she continued to spend money lavishly. Her shopping sprees often put extra pressure on our budget. Even with my contribution, which included covering $1,500 a month for household expenses and helping with utility bills and groceries, Susan's extravagant spending added to the strain. My father, James, tried to support us as best as he could, but his pension was just not enough. Things took a turn for the worse when James fell ill. His health deteriorated rapidly, and he was forced to retire early. His pension was reduced to just $1,200 a month, and with Susan's spending habits, it was clear that we were in financial trouble. I felt a strong sense of duty to support my parents, so I decided to stay home and manage our finances. I covered more of the household expenses, including the mortgage, which was $2,000 a month, and other bills. My contributions amounted to around $3,500 monthly. I hoped that my efforts would alleviate some of the financial burden from my parents. James, who had always been understanding and supportive, appreciated my help. "Sandra, thank you for everything," he'd say, his voice weak but sincere. Despite my best efforts, Susan remained ungrateful and continued to question my work. Our relationship was strained, and every conversation seemed to revolve around my job's legitimacy or her dissatisfaction with how I was managing things. Things became even more complicated when my brother, David, and his wife, Anna, decided to move back in with us. They arrived one evening, and I was shocked to see them at the door. Susan had invited them without telling me. David worked for a reputed company, and Anna was a housewife. I had always thought they were doing well financially, so their sudden move in seemed unexpected. David and Anna quickly began to treat me like an intruder in my own home. They demanded that I contribute more to the household chores, despite my busy work schedule. "Sandra, we need you to help with breakfast and cleaning," Anna said one morning, her tone sharp. I tried to explain that I was working and couldn't take on additional responsibilities. David and Anna's demands only added to the already mounting tension. Susan, who had always been critical of my work, now seemed to side with David and Anna. She echoed their frustrations and implied that I should do more around the house. The pressure was immense, and I felt suffocated. My contributions, both financial and otherwise, were overshadowed by their constant criticisms and demands. The turning point came when James's condition worsened, and he had to be hospitalized. The stress of managing the household while supporting my father became overwhelming. David and Anna, now fully settled in, pushed even harder for me to leave the house. They argued that my presence was unnecessary and that it was time for me to make way for them. I realized that I couldn't continue living in this toxic environment. Despite my efforts and sacrifices, I felt like an outsider in my own home. As the situation grew more hostile, I knew something had to change. The mounting tension was too much, and I had to consider what was best for me and my well-being. Sandra's story, as I've shared it so far, is a testament to the challenges of balancing familial responsibilities with personal dignity. As I faced growing hostility from my own family, I knew that making a difficult decision was inevitable. I had to decide whether to continue enduring this strain or to take a step that might finally bring me the peace I desperately needed. The journey ahead would be filled with tough choices and revelations, but one thing was clear. My life was on the brink of a significant change. Things started to unravel faster than I anticipated. With Dad's worsening condition and his hospitalization, the tension at home became unbearable. David and Anna's presence, instead of being a support, felt more like an added burden. The dynamic had shifted drastically, and I felt increasingly alienated. When Dad was admitted to the hospital, my daily routine became a whirlwind of managing household responsibilities and visiting him. The hospital bills were piling up, and despite my consistent $3,500 monthly contribution, the financial strain was evident. Susan's spending habits had not changed, and now, with the additional medical expenses, it was clear that we were running on thin ice. David, who had been working at a reputed company, was suddenly let go from his job. It was a blow to the family, as his salary was crucial to our finances. With him now unemployed, the financial pressure on me increased. David and Anna's move had already strained our budget, but now it was clear that my income, which had grown to $5,000 a month, was being stretched to its limits. Anna, who had always been critical, became even more demanding. "Sandra, we need to cut down on expenses. Why don't you do more around the house?" she would say, as if managing my software development work and covering a large portion of the household expenses wasn't enough. I felt trapped in a situation where my efforts were not only unappreciated, but also used against me. Susan's attitude only worsened. She sided with David and Anna, seemingly forgetting the sacrifices I had made. "Sandra, you need to do more," she'd say. Her demands were becoming unbearable. The constant questioning of my job and my role in the household made me feel as though I was being pushed aside in my own home. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of juggling work and hospital visits, Susan and David sat me down. They expressed their frustration over the state of the household and implied that I was not contributing enough. "Sandra, this isn't working out. We need to find a solution," David said, his tone laden with irritation. It was clear that their patience with me was running thin. The hostility was palpable, and it seemed that no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough. David and Anna's demands grew more unreasonable, and Susan's support for them left me feeling isolated. As the days passed, the atmosphere at home grew increasingly toxic. The conflicts between us were constant, and every small disagreement seemed to escalate into a full-blown argument. My efforts to maintain a semblance of normalcy were met with resistance and hostility. I was spending $2,000 a month on mortgage and $1,500 on other household expenses, but the constant financial pressure and emotional strain were taking their toll. The situation reached a breaking point when Susan, David, and Anna began to openly discuss the idea of me moving out. "Sandra, maybe it's time for you to find your own place," Susan suggested one afternoon. Her words were like a knife twisting in my side. I had already been feeling like a stranger in my own home, but hearing them talk about me leaving made me feel completely unwelcome. I knew that my decision to stay at home and support my family had been driven by a sense of duty and love. Yet, I couldn't ignore the growing resentment and the lack of appreciation for everything I had done. My financial contributions, my emotional support, and my efforts to balance work and home life seemed to be overshadowed by their demands and expectations. The weight of the situation was becoming too heavy to bear. I could see that my presence was no longer valued, and the hostility from David, Anna, and Susan made it clear that I needed to rethink my position. The idea of moving out, once a distant thought, now felt like an inevitable step towards reclaiming my dignity and peace of mind. As I navigated this tumultuous period, I started to plan my next steps. I knew that a difficult decision was approaching, and I had to consider what was best for my well-being. The toxic environment at home was stifling, and I needed to find a way to regain control of my life and finances. The days following the conversation with Susan, David, and Anna were suffocating. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, trapped between financial obligations and a family that no longer seemed to care about my well-being. The hostility was becoming unbearable, and I knew I had to act before things got even worse. The final straw came when I came home from the hospital after a long day to find David and Anna rearranging the living room. Susan had suggested they redecorate to make space for them, and now the living room, once my sanctuary, was filled with their belongings. I was stunned. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice strained. David barely looked up from the sofa he was arranging. "We're making some changes. You'll need to adjust," he said bluntly. His tone was dismissive, as though my opinion didn't matter. I knew that this was more than just a simple rearrangement. It was a sign of how little regard they had for my feelings and my place in the house. They were clearly trying to push me out, and it became evident that my departure was not just a possibility, but an expectation. Later that evening, Susan, David, and Anna sat me down again. "Sandra, we've been discussing the situation," Susan began. "With the extra expenses from the hospital and everything else, we think it's best if you find a new place to live." I felt a surge of frustration. "You think it's best? I've been supporting this family with my salary. I'm the one keeping this house running," I exclaimed. David's face was set in a hard line. "We need a fresh start, and frankly, we can't keep up with the expenses with you here. You need to move out and make space for us." Their words were a punch to the gut. They were pushing me to leave, not because they couldn't afford to stay, but because they couldn't handle the reality of their situation and were taking it out on me. My monthly contribution of $5,000 was no longer enough to cover the mounting expenses, and their financial mismanagement had only added to the burden. That night, I sat alone in my room, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. I realized I had to take drastic measures to protect my own well-being. I decided to transfer the money I had been using to support the household into my own account. It was a sum of about $15,000 that I had saved up to cover my share of the bills, mortgage, and other expenses. I knew that this action would have serious consequences, but I couldn't keep pouring my money into a bottomless pit while being treated like an outsider in my own home. I set up the transfer late at night, feeling a strange mixture of relief and guilt. Relief because I was taking control of my finances and my life, but guilt because I knew it would leave Susan, David, and Anna in a difficult position. The next morning, I packed a few essentials into my car and prepared to leave. As I walked through the house one last time, I took a deep breath, trying to absorb the weight of the moment. The house that had once been a place of comfort and family had become a battleground of conflict and resentment. When I finally left, I felt a surge of liberation. I had made the decision to prioritize my own well-being and self-respect, even if it meant facing the consequences of my actions. I knew that leaving behind the toxic environment was necessary for my own mental health and future happiness. I moved into a small apartment in a quieter part of Seattle. The rent was manageable, and I could afford it with my software developer salary. It wasn't much, but it was my own space, a place where I could start to rebuild my life on my own terms. In the weeks that followed, I focused on my career and my well-being. I visited Dad regularly at the hospital, offering him the support and love that I could, despite the distance. I worked hard to ensure that my new life was grounded in stability and independence. Meanwhile, back at the family home, David and Anna struggled with the sudden financial strain. David, now unemployed, found it challenging to manage the household expenses. Anna, unable to handle the pressure, eventually left him, seeking her own path away from the chaos. Susan's spending habits had caught up with her. Without my financial support, she struggled to cover the bills and faced mounting debts. The reality of the situation hit hard, and the once lavish lifestyle she enjoyed was replaced by a grim struggle to make ends meet. As I settled into my new life, I felt a sense of accomplishment and peace. I had made a difficult choice, but it was one that allowed me to regain control of my own life. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it with newfound strength and independence. The weeks turned into months, and as I settled into my new apartment, I found myself embracing a renewed sense of freedom. My small apartment in Seattle was a stark contrast to the bustling family home, but it was my sanctuary. It was where I could focus on my career as a software developer and begin to heal from the tumultuous past I'd left behind. The financial relief I experienced was immediate. With the $15,000 I had saved, I was able to cover the first few months of rent and set up my new place comfortably. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the rhythm of coding and the satisfaction of building something from scratch. My income was steady, and I was finally able to save money for myself, rather than funneling it into a household that didn't appreciate or respect me. The visits to Dad at the hospital became a highlight of my days. His condition was slowly improving, and though he was still far from fully recovered, seeing him more regularly brought us closer together. I made it a point to be there for him, offering both emotional support and practical help where I could. It was a small comfort amidst the chaos of my previous life. Back at the old family home, the fallout from my departure became evident. David struggled to manage the household finances. His termination from his job had left him in a precarious position, and without my $5,000 monthly contribution, he found it difficult to keep up with the bills. The stress of unemployment and financial insecurity took a toll on him, and his strained relationship with Susan only worsened. Anna, unable to cope with the mounting pressure and David's unemployment, decided to leave. She moved out of Seattle to start fresh somewhere else, leaving David to face the repercussions of our family's financial mismanagement alone. Susan, once so accustomed to a comfortable lifestyle, now faced the grim reality of mounting debts. Her spending habits had caught up with her, and she struggled to manage even the basic expenses. The house, once a symbol of prosperity, had become a source of stress and financial strain. Despite the turmoil, I found that I was growing stronger. My new life, though modest, was a testament to my resilience. I enjoyed the simple pleasure of organizing my own space and managing my finances without the constant interference and negativity from my family. I realized that my departure had been the catalyst for a much-needed change, both for myself and for them. One afternoon, as I was finishing up some work, I received a call from Susan. Her voice was weary, and there was a vulnerability in her tone that I had not heard before. "Sandra, I need to talk to you," she said. "Can we meet?" We arranged to meet at a cafe, and when I saw her, she looked worn and tired. Over coffee, Susan shared her struggles. She spoke of the mounting debts and the difficulty of managing on her own. The lavish spending that once seemed so natural had led her into a financial abyss, and she admitted that without my support, things had become nearly impossible. It was a difficult conversation, filled with mixed emotions. On one hand, I felt a sense of vindication. On the other, I was sympathetic to her plight. I had always wanted my family to appreciate the sacrifices I made, and seeing Susan's situation made me reflect on how things could have been different if there had been more understanding and less conflict. In the end, I offered Susan advice on managing her finances and suggested that she seek professional help to address her debt. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a way to support her from a distance, respecting the boundaries I had set for myself. As for me, I continued to thrive in my new environment. My career was on an upward trajectory, and my personal life was more stable than it had been in years. I had learned the importance of self-respect and independence, and I was committed to maintaining those values as I moved forward. Looking back, I realized that leaving was the hardest decision I had ever made, but it was also the most empowering. It marked the beginning of a new chapter where I could live for myself, make my own choices, and build a life that reflected my values and aspirations. My family's struggles were a stark reminder of the consequences of financial mismanagement and the importance of appreciating those who contribute selflessly. As I embraced my new life, I hoped that they, too, would find their path to resolution and growth.
I'm Lillian Warner, and my life as I knew it came crashing down on a Thursday evening. Gregory, my husband of 15 years, walked through our front door not alone, but with a young woman clinging to his arm. Her name was Vanessa, barely 23, with a smirk that seemed out of place in our family home. Without hesitation, Gregory dropped the bombshell. "I'm divorcing you, Lillian. Vanessa will be living here now. This house is hers," he declared, his voice devoid of the warmth I had known. My heart pounded in my chest, disbelief and confusion swirling within me. I had heard of such stories, but never imagined I would be the protagonist in this cruel plot. The calmness that enveloped me was more out of shock than composure. "You can't be serious," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Gregory laughed, a sound that now seemed foreign to me. "Oh, I am very serious. It's been a long time coming. You just never saw it." Vanessa, leaning against him, looked me over with an air of triumph. "He's tired of you, Lillian. It's obvious," she added. The scene felt surreal, like a bad dream, but the coldness in Gregory's eyes was real, too real. The man I had shared my life with, the father of our child, was a stranger to me now. "So this is it. You're throwing away our marriage, our family, for her?" I asked, my voice tinged with a bitterness I didn't know I possessed. "Family, please don't be so dramatic. It's not like we were happy. And yes, for Vanessa. She understands me, unlike you," he retorted. I felt the sting of his words, each one a betrayal. But amidst the pain, a sense of clarity began to take hold. Gregory was showing his true colors, and they were ugly and callous. "You're willing to destroy everything for a fling?" I questioned, my voice steadier now. "Fling? Oh, Lillian, it's much more than that. Vanessa is my future, and you're just the past," Gregory said dismissively. I looked at Vanessa, a girl young enough to be our daughter, entwined in what she believed was love. But I saw it for what it was, a midlife crisis, a cruel game. "Fine," I said, the shock giving way to resolve. "You want a divorce, you'll get it. But remember, Gregory, this house, it's as much mine as it is yours, and I won't go down without a fight." As they walked past me, I felt a shiver of disgust, not just at the sight of them together, but at the realization of how blind I had been. But this was not the end. It was a beginning. The beginning of my fight for my dignity, for my child, and for what was rightfully mine. The following days were a blur of emotions for me. My mind raced with memories of our life together, each now tainted by the revelation of Gregory's betrayal. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, my thoughts consumed by images of him with Vanessa, their laughter echoing in my ears. But amidst the turmoil, a plan began to take shape. I wouldn't let Gregory walk away unscathed. This wasn't just about a house or a marriage. It was about justice. I was going to make him regret his decision, regret ever thinking he could discard me like yesterday's newspaper. I sought the best divorce lawyer in town, someone known for their ruthless efficiency. As I explained my situation, the lawyer, Miss Johnson, listened intently, her eyes sharpening with each detail. "Gregory thinks he can just replace you and walk away with everything. Not on my watch," she said, her tone laced with determination. We pored over the legalities, and it became clear that he had underestimated me. The house which he so arrogantly promised to Vanessa was partly mine by law, and the land it stood on was inherited from my father, solely in my name. Gregory had no claim to it whatsoever. Armed with this information, I felt a surge of power. For the first time since Gregory's betrayal, I felt in control. I was going to turn the tables on him, and he wouldn't even see it coming. Miss Johnson drafted the divorce papers with precision, ensuring my rights were front and center. But it wasn't just about the legal battle, it was personal. Gregory had wounded me deeply, and I was going to return the favor. I couldn't wait to see the look on his face when he realized the house he planned to give to his mistress was not his to give. The thought brought a small, satisfied smile to my lips, but this was just the beginning. I was going to hit Gregory where it hurt the most. His ego, his pride, his wallet, nothing was off limits. He had started this war, but I was going to finish it. As I signed the divorce papers, I felt a mix of sadness and resolve. The life I had known was over, but a new chapter was beginning. A chapter where I was the author, and Gregory was merely a cautionary tale in the story of my life. The day I filed the divorce papers was a turning point. My heart raced with a cocktail of fear and exhilaration as I handed over the documents. This was it, the point of no return. But as I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was no longer the victim in Gregory's cruel play. I was now the protagonist in my own story of justice. Later, I met with Miss Johnson to discuss our next move. We sat in her office, the afternoon sun casting long shadows on the floor, plotting the downfall of the man I once loved. "Gregory's going to fight dirty Lillian. You need to be prepared." Wouldn't go down without a fight. He called me, his voice a mixture of disbelief and fury. "Lillian, what the hell do you think you're doing with this eviction notice?" he barked. "Just reclaiming what's mine, Gregory. You should have thought twice before deciding to give away something that wasn't yours," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "This is ridiculous. You're doing this to get back at me, aren't you?" he accused. "It's not about revenge, Gregory. It's about justice. You can't just take what you want without consequences," I countered. Gregory was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. He had underestimated me, thinking I would quietly retreat. But I was fighting back, and I wasn't going to stop until I had what was right. "What's rightfully mine isn't over, Lillian. I'll fight this," he finally said. "Go ahead," I responded. "But remember, the law is on my side, and I'm not backing down." After hanging up, I felt a surge of power. For too long I had let Gregory dictate our lives, but now the tables were turned. I was in control, and I would not relent until justice was served. The weeks that followed were a chess game of legal maneuvers and emotional confrontations. Gregory, caught off guard by the eviction notice, launched into a series of desperate attempts to sway the situation in his favor. But with each move, he only entangled himself further into the web of his own making. One evening, as I sat in my living room, the phone rang. The caller ID flashed Gregory's name, and I braced myself for another round of his pleading and anger. "Lillian, you can't do this to me, to us." Gregory's voice came through, tinged with frustration. "Us? There's no us anymore, Gregory. You made sure of that," I replied, my voice steady. "This is madness. You're going to leave me homeless over some petty revenge," he argued. "Petty? You call destroying our family petty?" I shot back. "This isn't about revenge, Gregory. It's about consequences. Your actions have them, and now you're facing them." Gregory's voice turned softer, almost pleading. "Lillian, please, let's talk about this. We can sort it out for old time's sake." I almost laughed. Old time's sake, as if our years together were mere tokens to be traded in times of trouble. "There's nothing left to sort out, Gregory. You made your choices. Now you live with them," I said, cutting him off. He was silent for a moment, and I could sense his desperation mounting. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Seeing me suffer?" "It's not about enjoyment, Gregory. It's about justice. You need to understand that every action has a consequence, and this," I paused, "this is yours." I hung up before he could respond. My heart was racing, but there was a sense of empowerment in standing my ground. For too long I had let Gregory dictate the terms of our life, but now the balance had shifted. I was no longer the passive wife he thought he could easily discard. In the following days, the reality of his situation seemed to dawn on Gregory. His calls became less frequent, his voice less assured. The man who had once held all the power in our relationship was now scrambling to salvage what little he could from the ruins he had created. And Vanessa, her presence in the background of this drama, was a constant reminder of the catalyst for all of this. But I knew her part in Gregory's story was coming to an end. She was just another pawn in his game, and soon she would realize it too. I lay awake at night, the silence of the house a stark contrast to the chaos of my thoughts. But amidst the turmoil, there was a growing sense of clarity. I was doing the right thing, not just for me, but for our child. In this battle of wills, I was not just fighting for my rights, I was fighting for our future. As the legal battle intensified, Gregory's veneer of control began to crack. The house he had intended to gift Vanessa was slipping through his fingers, and with it, his imagined future. His desperation became more evident with each passing day. One afternoon, as I reviewed some documents for Miss Johnson, my phone buzzed with a message from Gregory. It was an invitation, or rather a plea, for a meeting. Against my better judgment, I agreed. It was time to face him, not as his wife, but as the architect of his downfall. We met at a quiet cafe, a neutral ground amidst our war. Gregory looked haggard, the strain of the situation etching deep lines on his face. As he saw me, his expression shifted from relief to something darker. "Lillian, thank you for coming. We need to sort this out," he started, his voice shaky. "Sort this out? You mean to find a way for you to weasel out of the consequences?" I replied coldly. He leaned forward, his eyes searching mine. "I know I've made mistakes, but this is too much. You're taking everything from me, everything," he pleaded. "No, Gregory, I'm taking back what's mine. You made your choice when you decided to betray our family. Now I'm making mine," I said firmly. Gregory's frustration boiled over. "You're heartless. Do you enjoy seeing me like this, struggling, begging?" I met his gaze unflinchingly. "Heartless? Do you dare call me heartless after what you've done? This isn't about enjoyment, Gregory. It's about justice. You can beg all you want, but it changes nothing." He slumped back in his chair, defeated. "So what? You're going to leave me homeless, ruin me?" "If that's what it takes for you to understand the gravity of your actions, then yes," I said. You thought you could discard me without any repercussions. You were wrong, I added. Gregory looked away, the reality of his situation finally dawning on him. What about Vanessa? He asked, almost as an afterthought. Vanessa? She's your concern, not mine. Though I doubt she'll stick around once she realizes there's nothing left for her here, I replied as I stood up to leave. Gregory reached out in a last-ditch effort to salvage something from the wreckage. Lillian, please, he pleaded. I pulled away. Savior, please, Gregory. It's too late for that. You've made your bed. Now you lie in it. Walking away from that cafe, I felt a surge of liberation. The chains of our marriage, once so constrictive, were now broken. I was free from Gregory's betrayal, free to rebuild my life on my terms. In the wake of our meeting, Gregory's attempts to sway the situation became increasingly frantic and futile. His calls, once demanding and arrogant, were now laced with desperation. The tables had turned, and he was slowly coming to terms with the magnitude of his mistakes. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone rang. The familiar jingle brought an involuntary sigh. It was Gregory again. Bracing myself, I answered, Lillian, you can't do this. We can talk about this. There has to be another way, Gregory pleaded, his voice cracking. Another way? After everything you've done, you think there's a way out for you. I responded, my voice laced with incredulity. It's not just about me. Think about our child, Lillian. This affects them too, he argued, playing what he thought was his trump card. Our child? The same child you so easily dismissed in your plans with Vanessa? No, Gregory, this is about justice. This is about making sure our child knows that actions have consequences, I retorted. There was a pause on the other end, a silence filled with unspoken realizations. Gregory had always underestimated me, but no longer. I was no longer the woman he thought he could control and manipulate. You're going to regret this, Lillian. You're pushing me too far, Gregory said, his voice a mixture of anger and fear. Regret? The only regret I have is not seeing your true colors sooner. You're not being pushed too far. You're just finally being held accountable, I shot back. Gregory's frustration boiled over. You think you've won, don't you? You think you can just take everything and leave me with nothing. Gregory seethed. This isn't about winning or losing, Gregory. It's about righting a wrong. You made your choices, and now you live with the consequences. It's that simple, I replied firmly. The call ended with Gregory's defeated silence, a stark contrast to his usual bluster. He was finally feeling the weight of his actions, the cost of his betrayal. In the following weeks, the reality of Gregory's situation became increasingly apparent. His financial resources dwindled, strained by legal fees and the loss of the house. Vanessa, ever the opportunist, began to distance herself, her affection waning as Gregory's fortunes declined. The final court hearing was a formality, a legal stamp on what was already a foregone conclusion. As I stood outside the courthouse, the decree in hand, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. Gregory's downfall was complete, a direct result of his actions. He had sown the seeds of his destruction, and I had merely ensured they grew. I turned my back on the courthouse, my heart lighter than it had been in months. The future lay ahead, undefined but promising. I had fought for justice for myself and my child, and emerged victorious. The months following the divorce and Gregory's eviction from the house brought profound changes. Our home, once tainted by the shadow of betrayal, slowly transformed back into a sanctuary of peace and strength for me and our child. Each room was cleansed of Gregory's presence, his memories replaced by new, joyful ones. Gregory's downfall continued in a downward spiral. Without the house and struggling financially, he was forced to move back in with his parents. The last I heard, Vanessa had left him, her affections as transient as the wealth she had hoped to secure. One day, as I tended to the garden, a task that had become a source of solace, my phone rang. The screen flashed Gregory's name. I had firmly closed that chapter, but curiosity piqued, I answered. Lillian, it's Gregory. His voice came through subdued and almost unrecognizable. What do you want, Gregory? I asked, my tone indifferent. I wanted to apologize for everything, he said, the words seemingly difficult for him to utter. Apologies don't change the past, Gregory. They don't undo the hurt, I replied calmly. I know, he admitted. I've lost everything, Lillian. Vanessa's gone. I'm living with my parents. I've hit rock bottom. That was your doing, Gregory. You made those choices, I stated plainly. There was a heavy sigh on the other end. I know. I thought you should know I regret it, Lillian. I regret it all. His words, laden with remorse, didn't bring me the satisfaction I had once thought they would. Instead, there was a sense of finality, a closing of a chapter that had caused so much pain. Your regret is your own to live with, Gregory. I've moved on. I suggest you do the same, I said, ready to end the conversation. Lillian, He started but trailed off. There's nothing more to say, Gregory. Goodbye, I said and hung up. As I put my phone away and turned back to my garden, a sense of peace washed over me. The past was behind me, and ahead was a life filled with possibilities, a life of my own making. The garden bloomed around me, a testament to new beginnings and growth. Our child laughed in the background, a sound that filled my heart with joy. This was my world now, one where betrayal and pain had no place. Gregory's chapter in my life was over, but mine was just beginning, a chapter filled with strength, resilience, and the love of those who truly mattered. Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. We'll see you on the Retaliation Realm channel.
It was a beautiful, sunny summer day, and the Appleton family was gathered on the patio. Craig, the head of the family, sat in the gazebo's shade, wearing a robe and a black bandage over his eyes. He sipped his coffee while his wife, Diana, sunbathed on a lounger with a cocktail. She looked stunning, her perfect figure and impeccable looks on full display. She fluttered her long, doll-like eyelashes before yelling at her stepdaughter, Lisa, a 7-year-old girl running around the pool, trying to catch a butterfly with a net. Lisa, stop running. Calm down. Can you play quietly for at least 5 minutes? Oh, you naughty child. The girl, active and adorable with her curly brown hair and chubby cheeks, resembled a little angel. She had long grown used to her stepmother's lack of affection, so she didn't even flinch at being scolded. A beautiful, huge butterfly with colorful wings landed on the edge of the pool. Lisa carefully pulled her phone from her pocket, hoping to take a picture. She approached closer and closer to the pool's edge, but suddenly, she stumbled and fell head over heels into the water. Lisa began screaming and flailing. She couldn't swim well. "Daddy! Daddy! I'm drowning! Help me!" she cried. Craig, hearing his daughter's panic, rushed to the pool. Almost blind, he staggered, his hands outstretched as he tried to find his way. "Diana, can't you hear her? Help Lisa! I can't see anything! Where am I going?" he shouted. But Diana didn't even get up from her lounger. She merely protested, "You little brat. I told you to sit quietly. This will teach you a lesson. Stop shouting and swim to the edge. Come on." Hearing Lisa's desperate cries, the gardener, Peter, threw down his lawnmower and sprinted to the pool. Without hesitation, he jumped into the water and quickly pulled the little girl out. Lisa, drenched and trembling, rushed to her father, hugging him tightly. "Daddy, I was so scared. I just wanted to take a picture of the butterfly. My phone drowned too. I didn't mean to." "It's okay, sweetie," Craig reassured her, patting her back. "We'll get you a new phone. Those things don't matter. The important thing is you're safe and healthy." Now go inside, change into dry clothes, and please be more careful next time. Don't go near the edge, it's slippery. You scared Daddy half to death. Diana, however, was furious. What a weakling you are. You should have punished her for not listening. She almost drowned and ruined an expensive phone, and all you do is spoil her. She's out of control. When are you going to hire a nanny for her? I can't handle this anymore. She's spoiled and unbearable. Craig's tone grew sharp. How dare you? She nearly drowned, and instead of helping, you sat there. If it weren't for Peter, we might have lost her. Lisa is just a child who's lost her mother. I love her very much, and if you want to be with me, you'll have to accept that. Do you think your child wouldn't run around or misbehave? And yes, I'll find a nanny. I've already posted an ad, but it's not easy now that I'm blind. Realizing she had gone too far, Diana quickly softened her tone. Don't be mad, darling. You know I love you. But I can't spend all day chasing after Lisa. I have my commitments: training, fitness, massages, beauty appointments. And now, with your business and your daughter on my plate, we need that nanny. It'll make life easier for all of us. Anyway, I have to go. I have a manicure at noon and a massage at 2. Love you. Don't miss me too much. Lisa, relieved that her stepmother was leaving, quietly sat next to her father, hugging him with her small hands. I'm sorry, Daddy. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Why is Diana so mean? She doesn't love me or you. Can't you see that? I miss my real mommy so much. Craig sighed and wrapped his arms around her. I miss her too, my little one. She was the best. But remember, she's in heaven now. And Diana, she's not so bad. You're just not used to each other yet. I promise, though, you'll get to help pick out the nanny. We have another candidate coming soon. The girl kissed her father's cheek and ran off to play with her dolls in the yard, while Craig closed his eyes in pain, lost in memories. His first wife, Vanessa, had been beautiful, a perfect homemaker, and from a respectable family. But most importantly, she loved Craig. They were supposed to live happily ever after, but 2 years ago, Vanessa died of a serious genetic illness. It all began after giving birth. First, her vision deteriorated, then her memory faded. Soon, her arms and legs stopped working, and before long, Vanessa was bedridden, gradually wasting away. It was terrifying, watching such a young, beautiful woman become helpless. Craig was beside himself with despair. No matter how much he spent on the best medicine or treatment, nothing could bring her back to health. After Vanessa's funeral, their daughter withdrew into herself, crying constantly and still mourning her mother. Craig, too, thought he'd never be able to move on or live with anyone else. But one day, at a business dinner, everything changed. It was at a restaurant, and he saw Diana. She was sitting with a friend, sipping martinis and laughing, full of life. The dinner slowly transitioned into an evening of fun, and soon Craig found himself dancing with her. The slow dance, her youthful and desirable body, the beauty she exuded, it was overwhelming. That was how their romance started, and it quickly led to a wedding. Diana settled in fast, taking on the role of the mistress of the house with confidence. She gave orders, commanded the staff, and made herself comfortable. But she and Lisa never got along. The tension between them was mutual, and Craig chalked it up to jealousy, thinking his daughter just needed time to adjust. But even after 2 years, nothing improved. The relationship between Diana and Lisa had only worsened. They openly fought. Then, just 2 weeks ago, a terrible incident occurred. Their driver, Tim, had asked for some time off for personal reasons, so Craig had to drive himself to work. That evening, after staying late at the office, he was walking to his car when 3 bandits attacked him from behind. He fought back, but one of the criminals sprayed pepper spray directly into his eyes. Luckily, a passing patrol car scared the attackers off, but the damage had been done. Craig's eyes were severely burned, leaving him almost blind. Now, he had to wear black sunglasses or a blindfold while undergoing treatment. The doctors had warned that if the medication didn't work, he would need surgery to restore his vision. It was a slim hope, but it kept him going. Craig, now practically disabled, was forced to manage his company from home. He communicated with partners over the phone and held online conferences. Surprisingly, Diana threw herself into the business, quickly taking charge and handling things efficiently. Still, Craig couldn't shake the nagging thought of who could have held such a grudge against him to orchestrate the attack. He hadn't had sharp conflicts in years. His thoughts were interrupted by a pleasant voice. "Good afternoon. Are you Craig Appleton? My name is Carol. I'm here for the nanny position. I'm scheduled for noon." Craig smiled. Though he couldn't see her, something about her voice felt warm and reassuring. For some reason, he imagined she was a pleasant, young woman. He started asking questions. "Carol, how old are you? Have you been working with children for a long time? Do you have recommendations from your previous job? And what kind of education do you have? I love my daughter very much, and I want to find a true professional for her." Carol sighed softly before answering, "Then I probably won't suit you. I don't have recommendations, but I love children, and I'm ready to work for a small fee. I've already met Lisa. She's a wonderful girl. I promise to be with her all the time and teach her." At that moment, Lisa ran up, noticing her father's hesitation. With a cheerful tone and a wink at Carol, she said, "Daddy, stop frowning. Let's juice. I like Carol. And didn't you say I'd get to choose the nanny myself?" Craig weighed all the pros and cons. Carol was too young, only 23. No experience, no recommendations. Who knew what kind of person she was? But then there was her voice, so kind, so calming, and, more importantly, Lisa liked her. That was a first. He took a deep breath. "Oh well, what will be will be. All right, Carol, you're hired, but on a trial basis. You can start right away. There's a schedule of lessons and a daily routine in Lisa's room. You'll need to take her to dance and drawing classes, help her with homework, make sure she eats properly, and report to me about any changes in her health. Is everything clear?" Carol nearly cried with joy. She needed this job. "Thank you. You won't regret it, I promise. I'll do my best." From that day on, Carol began working for the Appletons, and she was fantastic. Lisa adored her. Unlike others, Carol didn't pressure or scold her. They were more like friends. If Lisa started slacking off or didn't want to practice writing her letters, Carol had a clever way of getting her back on track. She'd immediately suggest a competition. "All right, whoever finishes the task faster and better gets the biggest, most delicious vanilla ice cream. And the loser, well, they'll have to eat oatmeal for 2 days. I hate oatmeal. What about you?" With that, Lisa would puff and scribble those dreaded alphabet letters, determined to beat Carol and avoid the gross oatmeal. Craig was thrilled with the new nanny. His daughter's academic progress improved, and her mood was brighter. Every evening, Lisa would excitedly share stories about how Carol had taught her to make fancy hairstyles or weave macrame. Only Diana wasn't pleased. She kept muttering, "You picked a strange nanny for Lisa. She's just a young upstart and spoils your daughter more than you do. What kind of upbringing is this? She should be stricter with Lisa. Otherwise, she'll just relax completely," Diana muttered. "The girls started ignoring me. Before, at least she'd get angry, but now she just stays quiet and runs to Carol." Craig chuckled. "You won't be satisfied with anyone, my dear. No nanny is good enough, but having a nanny isn't good either. If Lisa's rude, you don't like it. If she doesn't say anything, it's bad too. Maybe you just don't want to find a way to connect with her." Diana pursed her lips and fell into a sulky silence, thinking to herself, "Do whatever you want. Just keep that annoying girl away from me. I'm so tired of her, In the mansion, there was a grand piano. Craig had been a musician in his younger days, and from time to time, he would play some melodies when feeling nostalgic. One afternoon, while resting, he overheard Carol and Lisa giggling as they played The Dog Waltz on the piano together. Their laughter echoed through the house, and Craig nearly fell off his chair in surprise. "Carol," he called out, "do you play the piano?" "I'm pleasantly surprised. I used to be a musician." Play something else. I'm curious to hear more. Carol blushed, clearly flustered. I'm not a professional, but I had a wonderful music teacher at the orphanage. She said I had talent. I love music, especially this melody. It always touches my heart. She sat down at the piano and began to play a slow, romantic tune. As the gentle notes filled the room, Craig felt a wave of emotion wash over him. Tears streamed down his face. The melody transported him back to his youth, awakening memories long buried. His soul stirred with feelings he hadn't experienced in years. My God, he whispered to himself. This is simply impossible. When Carol finished, Craig wiped his eyes and thanked her. Tell me, where did you learn this melody? It's not recorded anywhere, I'm sure of it. It was written by someone I used to know. Carol hesitated for a moment before answering. My neighbor, Rachel, taught me to play it. She's a talented woman. If you could hear her play. But she's had a rough time recently. Her son was taken away, and she lost her job for no good reason. She's been in a deep depression, and I've been trying to help her as best I can. Craig's heart pounded in his chest. His legs felt weak. Rachel, what's her last name? How old is her son? Why was he taken from her? Carol sighed softly. Her last name is Lesnikova. She's around 30. Her son was taken away by social services, but I don't know all the details. She's been struggling ever since. I didn't ask much about it, to be honest, Carol continued, but her son's name is Adam. He's 9 years old, such a wonderful boy. Smart and serious beyond his years. I don't know if Rachel was ever married or who Adam's father is, but she once mentioned her first and tragically failed love. Rachel used to work as a music teacher at a private school. She earned a decent salary and was always dedicated to her job. But then the director, a married man over 50 with grandchildren, started harassing her. He threatened that if she didn't sleep with him, he'd make her life so miserable she'd end up begging him. But Rachel isn't one to back down. When he crossed the line and groped her in his office, she slapped him and threatened to go to his wife and report him to the police. Carol's voice hardened as she recalled the story. That's when things went south. He made her life hell. One day, while she was out, someone broke into her apartment so carefully that no one could detect it. They scattered cigarette butts and whiskey bottles everywhere. As soon as Rachel and Adam came home from school, child services, along with fake witnesses, stormed in. Rachel was blindsided. She didn't understand how it happened. They took Adam away, claiming she was neglecting him, drinking, and not caring for him. Lies, all of it. I've been to her place many times. It's always spotless. She didn't smoke, and the most she'd have was a bit of wine on birthdays or holidays. Carol paused, her voice filled with frustration. Since then, Rachel's been fighting nonstop to get her son back, knocking on every door, trying to prove she was framed. But it's all been in vain. The director fired her, publicly humiliated her, and labeled her an unfit mother. She's been crushed ever since, spending her days crying outside the orphanage, trying to see Adam. He's suffering there, begging to come home. You know, they always make orphanages look so great on TV, well-fed kids, happy faces, but it's not like that. I was an orphan myself. I know what it's really like. It's a nightmare. I feel so sorry for Rachel and Adam. If I could, I'd strangle that old man for what he's done. Craig sat there, stunned, tears falling from his already damaged eyes. Everything Carol said aligned too perfectly. It couldn't be a coincidence. His voice trembled as he spoke. Carol, please, bring Rachel here tomorrow. I need to see her, at least hear her voice. We've known each other. It's a long story, but just do it. Tell her Craig is waiting for her. Carol, surprised by Craig's urgency, nodded. Okay, I'll try. I'll bring her in the morning if she's willing. But how should I explain this to her? Craig's voice broke. Just tell her. Craig is waiting. When Carol left to feed Lisa lunch, Craig locked himself in his office, clasping his head in his hands. His mind drifted back to his youth, back to Rachel. Craig had grown up without a father, raised by his mother. She told him wild stories about his father being a polar explorer or a geologist, but as Craig got older, he saw through them. By then, he had stopped asking those silly questions and instead focused on what he truly loved. Craig's mind was filled with memories of his youth, particularly of Rachel. As a child, he had a natural gift for music, and it was through this passion that he first met her. He could still picture her, that skinny little girl with huge bows in her hair, holding her sheet music. They were inseparable from that moment on, becoming best friends and later falling deeply in love. Together, they pursued their musical dreams, performing at concerts and dreaming of a future in music. But as time passed, Craig's ambitions shifted. While Rachel remained dedicated to music and the simple joys of life, Craig became frustrated with their financial situation. He wanted more. He dreamed of wealth, a big house, a nice car, and a comfortable life. His passion for music faded, replaced by a desire for business success. Their relationship began to strain. Rachel, who lived for love, music, and simplicity, didn't understand Craig's obsession with money. She was hurt when he dismissed their shared passion for music and pushed her to give private lessons to earn more. In a heated argument, she threw the gold earrings he had bought her back in his face. That moment marked the end of their relationship. Craig, angry and determined to prove himself, threw himself into the business world. He worked tirelessly, building a chain of auto repair shops and eventually meeting Vanessa, with whom he started a family. But as he immersed himself in his career and family life, the memory of Rachel and their shared love of music faded into the background. It wasn't until Vanessa's tragic death that Craig began to feel the weight of his choices. But even then, he moved forward, meeting and marrying Diana, whose fiery passion was very different from the quiet, ethereal connection he had shared with Rachel. Yet now, hearing that haunting melody, the same one Rachel had played all those years ago, everything came rushing back. The memories, the regrets, the what-ifs. He realized how deeply Rachel had impacted his life. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was a longing, an aching desire to reconnect with the person who had once been his everything. The night was long, filled with restless thoughts of what the next day might bring. Craig meticulously prepared himself the following morning, shaving and dressing with care, his heart pounding with anticipation. He had no idea what Rachel's life had been like after they parted ways. But one thing was clear, his first love had never truly left his heart. And now he was about to see her again after all these years. Edward's smirk widened as he arrogantly leaned back in his chair. "You should have just listened to me from the beginning, Rachel. I told you, no one refuses me. It wasn't hard to set you up, just a few calls, some well-placed bribes, and those child services clowns were eating out of my hand. Your spotless reputation? Easy to ruin when people are willing to believe the worst. All because you wouldn't play nice." Rachel felt her stomach churn, but she kept her composure. Every word he spoke was being recorded. The champagne glass trembled slightly in her hand, but she knew she had to keep him talking. She took a small sip, fighting the nausea rising in her throat. "You ruined my life," she said softly, her voice shaking with both fear and fury. "All because I wouldn't give in to your disgusting demands." Edward's face darkened for a moment, but then he shrugged, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "What can I say? I always get what I want. But don't worry, once this is over, I'll give you your precious son back. As long as you do exactly as I say tonight, your nightmare will end." Rachel felt her blood run cold, but she forced herself to smile, leaning in slightly to keep the conversation going. "But how did you manage to get everyone on your side? The lies, the fake witnesses, you made it all happen so fast. I didn't even see it coming." Edward laughed, swirling the champagne in his glass. "Oh, that was the easy part. Money talks, my dear. And I've got plenty of it. People will say whatever I want them to say for the right price. They're all puppets, and I pull the strings." Rachel could hardly believe the level of arrogance and evil sitting in front of her. The rage was bubbling up inside her, but she knew she had to stay calm for just a little longer. She glanced toward the window, knowing the police were waiting for her signal. "Well," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "If it means getting Adam back, I'll do whatever you want." Edward's eyes lit up with lust, and he stood up, moving toward her. "That's the spirit. Now, why don't you come here and—" Before he could finish, Rachel turned toward the window and flung it open. Within seconds, the door burst open, and the room flooded with police officers. Edward's smug grin vanished, replaced by shock and fury as they tackled him to the ground. "What the hell is this?" he screamed, struggling against the officers. "You can't do this to me. I'm untouchable." But the police weren't listening. They were already slapping handcuffs on him, reading him his rights as he continued to shout and curse. Rachel stood frozen, watching the scene unfold, her heart racing with both fear and relief. She had done it. She had brought him down. The weight of the past months lifted from her shoulders, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to hope. As the officers dragged Edward out of the room, Henry Black approached Rachel, a look of admiration on his face. "You were incredible," he said. "We've got everything we need to put him away for a long time. Adam will be back with you soon." Rachel nodded, tears of relief welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." Craig, waiting outside, heard the commotion and, despite his limited vision, rushed toward Rachel, pulling her into a tight embrace. "It's over," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "We did it. Adam is coming home." Rachel sobbed into his chest, overcome with relief and gratitude. She had her son back. And maybe, just maybe, she could have a future with Craig too. "Do you think my secretary and the physical education teacher work here for nothing? They turned out to be smarter than you and now receive excellent salaries and regular bonuses. As for you, there's nothing complicated. My good and very close acquaintance works in the guardianship authorities, and it was thanks to my patronage that she got there. She paid me back by putting your boy in an orphanage. I hired bandits and witnesses to create that mess in your flat. Money solves everything these days, believe me. Well, I liked you. I fell for you. So, the more pleasure you give me, the faster you'll get your son back. Are you relaxed now? Take off your clothes. You talk too much." Rachel realized she couldn't delay any longer. Pretending to unbutton her blouse, she walked over to the window and quickly opened it. She began to pray and wait for the police officer to arrive. The director, having lost all control, ran up to her with surprising agility for his age and began to indecently touch her, trying to rip her blouse off. Rachel started screaming and fighting back, repulsed by the old man. Edward began to push her, knocking everything off the table. "Shut up, you fool. There's no one here anyway. Even the janitor is gone. Why did you decide to fight again? Have you lost your mind?" At that moment, the flimsy door burst open with a crash, and the operative burst into the office. He swiftly arrested the scoundrel and rebuked him. "Shame on you for engaging in such indecent behavior at your age. And you're a married man with grandchildren. How will they feel learning what their grandfather has been up to?" The director cursed and struggled to break free. "You had me wrapped around your finger. You'll pay for this. I have connections, you know." The policeman quickly shut him up. "We'll deal with your connections later. How did you manage to take this woman's child and cover it up?" Rachel finally relaxed, exhaled, and burst into tears from the stress she had just endured. "Will they return Adam to me now? He confessed to everything, didn't he? Did I do everything right?" She handed the officer a recording device. He reassured her, "We'll sort everything out. I think you'll be reunited with your son soon. Don't worry. We'll send the scoundrel to prison. People like him belong behind bars." The case made headlines, and the lecherous director was convicted. The townspeople were outraged that he had worked at the educational institution for so many years. Rachel was reinstated at work, and her good name was restored. Most importantly, she was reunited with her son. The woman wept and kissed her little boy without stopping, and he couldn't let go of her embrace either. Meanwhile, Craig eagerly awaited the meeting with his son. He was so absorbed in Rachel's problems that he had completely forgotten about Diana. But she had been watching everything from the sidelines and decided to clarify the situation. "Darling, what's going on?" You're always on edge, making phone calls and talking about Rachel and her son. Can you explain something to me?" The man couldn't see his young wife's contorted, angry face, but he strongly felt the hatred and anger emanating from her. At that moment, he realized he no longer wanted to live with her. It was obvious she would never get along with his daughter. Furthermore, Craig didn't love her that much. It was more of a passion, an obsession that quickly dissipated. Diana had become more and more impudent, taking control of everything in his house and becoming almost uncontrollable, imagining herself as the mistress of everything. Craig sighed heavily and began the unpleasant conversation. "You're right, Diana. We needed to talk seriously for a long time. First, I'll answer your question. Rachel is my first and long-standing love. We studied together at music school, and then we foolishly broke up. It turned out she was already pregnant, but didn't even know it yet. She gave birth to a son named Adam. So now I'm the father of 2 children, Lisa and Adam." Diana exploded. "Even better. Are you saying that besides your spoiled daughter, there will also be a boy living here? That's terrible. I don't even want my children yet, and you're pushing someone else's on me." Craig bitterly smiled. "You didn't listen to me, Diana. Our romance spun so fast that I couldn't even understand anything myself. But the passion quickly faded, and now, 2 years later, we're almost strangers. You don't get along with Lisa, and it seems you're not going to find a way to connect with her. When I saw Rachel after many years, I realized I still loved her as I did in my youth. I understand it's unpleasant for you to hear this now, but I'm not going to lie. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk to the doctor about eye surgery, and then we'll probably have to part ways. Don't worry, I'll leave you the apartment in the residential area and the car I gave you. After that, you're on your own. You'll have to find a job and live like everyone else." Diana jumped up and screamed in a voice not her own. "What a statement. I'm your wife, so half of all your property and business is mine. I'll take everything that's rightfully mine. Ungrateful. I've been living with you for 2 years, putting up with your unbearable daughter. At least you could say thank you. By the way, I'm not going to live with you anymore either. I don't need another burden on my shoulders. I'm only 25 years old, with my whole life ahead of me. I want to have fun and enjoy life, not take care of someone else's children and a blind husband." Craig couldn't take it anymore. "So that's how you talk? Well, I was healthy, giving you gifts, buying you gold, and being a good husband. Now that I'm disabled, I'm not good enough for you? Well then, we can say goodbye right now. I won't keep you any longer." Diana realized she had said too much and changed tactics. "Honey, wait. Let's stop. We both got angry and said too much. Let's wait until you get better and recover before we have this unpleasant conversation, okay? Great. Don't rush into surgery. The doctor said a month, not earlier. Otherwise, God forbid, there may be complications. Come to me. I'll kiss you." But it all sounded so insincere and fake that Craig just pushed away from his wife and sharply replied, "As you wish. I've said everything. Sorry, I need to listen to the recording of the meeting sent by my deputy." Diana quickly left the man's office, boiling inside with anger. "Oh, you miserable invalid. He's leaving me an apartment. What am I supposed to live on? Go work? God forbid. I'm not meant for this. Just wait. I'll get you. You'll remember me for a long time." Craig didn't listen to his wife and decided to consult a professor. Rachel offered to go with him to support him as a friend. It was so touching and pleasant. Carol and Lisa had their after-school activities that day, including drawing and sculpting. They came home late and froze in shock. There was a terrible mess in the house. The safe was open and empty, and many expensive items and electronics were missing. Carol was scared to death and immediately called the police. "Craig, we have an emergency. Lisa and I just got back and we've been robbed. Everything's turned upside down. The safe's open. There's no TV. There were documents on your shelf. Maybe something else is missing. I can't tell right away. I called the police. Come quickly." Craig ordered Carol, "Okay, go with Lisa to the children's room. Lock yourselves in, and don't open the door for anyone until I get there. I'll be there soon." He immediately forgot about his illness. Craig turned on the camera recording and was horrified by what he saw. Diana and the driver, Tim, were running around the house, grabbing everything in sight: electronics, jewelry, money, and valuable papers. Diana had no idea that there were cameras, so she got angry and shouted, "There you go, hubby. You'll remember me yet." Tim responded with anger, "What a lucky wretch. We couldn't finish him off then, only blinded him. Otherwise, we would have sent Lisa to a shelter and lived here like kings." And where did that patron come from? They never passed by here before. Diana shouted at Tim to hurry up, since the nanny and Lisa would be back any minute. They needed to sell everything quickly and order tickets to a warm place. Craig was in shock. The police quickly took fingerprints and rushed to catch the couple. Craig's daughter hugged and comforted her father. "I told you a long time ago, Daddy. Diana doesn't love us. She's mean and bad, and you didn't believe me. You'll kick her out now, won't you?" Craig kissed his princess. "You're growing up so fast." "Yes, Diana won't be living with us anymore. But I would like to introduce you to a nice woman. Remember when she came to visit us once? Her name is Rachel, and she has a son, Adam. He's your brother. It's a long story. You'll understand when you're older. I hope you two get along." Diana and Tim will be punished by the police and sent to prison. His daughter suddenly asked anxiously, "But will everything be okay now, Daddy?" "Daddy, what did the doctor say? Will your eyes be able to see again?" Craig answered his daughter, "I'm going for surgery on Monday. You and Carol will be together all the time, and Adam will be with you too. His mother will go with me to the hospital. Please listen to Carol and be a good girl." The police quickly found the lovers by following a hot trail to Tim's apartment, handcuffed them, and took them to the station. Now, both faced a significant sentence for attempting to harm Craig and stealing from him. Diana was in a panic. The gray, damp government walls, the dirty mattress, and the terrible gruel filled her with indescribable horror. Only now did she realize what awaited her. She cried day and night, cursing herself. "Fool. Why didn't I just live peacefully? And now what? What did I ever get involved with Tim for? I need to meet with Craig urgently and beg for forgiveness. He's kind. He'll forgive me. I agree to leave the city as far as possible, anywhere as long as it's not prison." Meanwhile, Craig filed for divorce, leaving all the hassle to his lawyer, and went in for surgery. Rachel was by his side, while Carol stayed at home with the children. Adam was initially shy and embarrassed, but the lively and restless Lisa quickly befriended him. Within a day, he felt at home in the Appleton house. After school, they always visited Craig in the hospital. The operation was successful, and soon the bandage would be removed from his eyes. Everyone eagerly awaited this moment. During this difficult time, Craig, Rachel, Carol, and the children became so close that they truly formed one big, friendly team. Lisa and Adam understood that their father was sick and tried not to misbehave or upset him, especially since they always had fun and interesting times with Carol. Finally, Craig's bandage was carefully removed. Bright light immediately hit his eyes, and he instinctively closed them. Tears streamed down his face. Then, he slowly began to open them and finally saw the world as it was before the tragedy. The doctor examined Craig, was satisfied, and ordered him to prepare for discharge. When Craig walked out of the office, smiling broadly, and saw Rachel in the hallway, he exclaimed, "My dear, I knew you hadn't changed at all over the years. You've just become even more beautiful. The same lips, curls, long eyelashes, and the lock tucked behind your ear. Rachel, you are so beautiful. Finally, I can look at you, admire you every second, and see my son. Thanks to Carol, I will be grateful to her for the rest of my life for playing our melody on the piano. Believe me, I almost fainted. Everything in my soul stirred. You wrote it yourself, Rachel. How happy I am that you've appeared in my life again. I am ready to sell all this business, hell with it. It has been a thorn in my side. I have earned enough money over the years for my whole family to live comfortably for many years. So let's try to live as you want, in love, peace, and enjoying each other and beloved music. Are you okay with that?" Rachel cried tears of joy and hugged Craig. You're my little fool. These are the words I was hoping to hear from you back then. You know, I was so upset that you chose money and business over our love and calling to music. Of course, I agree. I still love you. Do you remember when we first kissed? You played me the Moonlight Sonata, and then we spent the whole night looking for the Big Dipper in the night sky, passionately kissing. You wrapped me in your jacket and held me gently, hiding me from the rain. At that moment, I was the happiest. Do you believe me? Let's go home. Everyone is waiting for us there. When Lisa saw how confidently her father walked out of the car, she understood that he could see and immediately rushed to him. Hooray, Daddy! You recovered. I'm so happy. Let's go quickly. We baked you a cake. You'll love it. Adam and I helped Carol. Adam stood shyly on the sidelines, not daring to approach Craig. They still hadn't talked properly. Craig told Lisa to run into the house and approach the boy himself. Well, hello, son. Finally, I see you and can look at you. We look alike, ears and a smile are mine. You can't deny it. Did your mom tell you that I'm your dad? I'm so upset that I didn't know anything about you before, and 9 years of your life passed me by. But now that we've met, let me be a real father, the closest person I would like to be. Know that I love you, son. I will never hurt you, and I will always support you in everything. He extended his hand to the boy, and Adam shook it firmly. Then he said quietly, I'm glad you're with me now, Dad. I see how Mom is smiling. Craig hugged the boy tightly, pressing him to himself. Now we will all live together as one big family. You seem to have made peace with Lisa. She's your little sister, so stick together and support each other in life. Now, let's go have lunch. From that day on, Craig Appleton's life changed dramatically. He became an entirely different person. Unexpectedly, he sold his prosperous business and threw himself into caring for his family and music. Every morning, he approached the piano with pleasure, playing his favorite and long-forgotten melodies. He even took out an old music notebook. Rachel became his tutor and also taught the children. It turned out to be a great success, as both Rachel and Craig had colossal natural talent. They decided to take a risk and open their brainchild, a private music school. The couple married modestly, not wanting to attract attention to their lives. They had no time for that, preferring instead to admire and look at each other. Only now did Craig realize that all these years, he had been living someone else's life. He had chosen the wrong job and the wrong woman, dragging this burden by inertia. The only thing he did not regret at all was his daughter, Lisa. She was his sunshine, a stimulus to live and create. Rachel quickly became friends with Lisa. Her naturally soft demeanor, love for children, and work at school made her a perfect fit. Carol, initially afraid of being fired, was reassured by Craig and Rachel. Don't worry, Carol. Stay in our house. You are no longer a stranger to us, and the children cannot do without you. Even with just Lisa, it wasn't boring here, and now there are 2 little brats. Everyone needs to keep an eye on them. Meanwhile, Diana sat in pretrial detention, praying for a meeting with Craig. However, he deliberately delayed the meeting, wanting to teach her a lesson and forever discourage her from wanting to steal and cheat. Diana became thin, with dull and lifeless skin. The thought of spending the coming years in such stuffiness filled her with sickness and despair. When Diana was told that her ex-husband was ready to meet her, she almost jumped for joy. However, when the skinny Diana, dressed in a crumpled tracksuit with greasy hair and a messy bun, entered the room for the negotiations, Craig flinched. The difference between her present self and the confident, brazen woman she once was striking. Diana quietly began to plead, tears in her eyes. Forgive me, Craig, if you can. I am to blame for everything. Now I am left with nothing. I beg you, withdraw the statement. I don't want to go to jail. I'm just dying here. I promise I'll leave right away to live with my mother and never appear in your life again. Have mercy on me. Forgive me. Craig replied, I hope jail has served as an excellent lesson for you. You won't steal from someone else again, at least not from someone who supports you, and you won't harm your next husband either. That plan failed, and my vision has fully recovered. Just so you know, Lisa is a wonderful child. She gets along with Carol, Rachel, and her little brother Adam. It wasn't about her at all. It was about you. You're a wicked, calculating, selfish person who only thinks about your interests. I will withdraw the statement, but if you ever show up again, you'll end up in jail. I've kept the camera recording safe. Diana cried and whispered, "Thank you." The Appleton family lived in peace and harmony. Many people in the city and their children wanted to attend their music school. Lisa and Adam both played instruments. Adam chose the guitar and drums, while Lisa continued with the piano. Rachel often composed her melodies, and Craig wrote poetry. They had family songs that they all enjoyed singing together. Finally, Craig's life was filled with the meaning he had always dreamed of.
My name is Erica, and I never thought I'd be caught up in a family drama that would change my life forever. At 29, I was living a pretty ordinary life in the city. For the past 5 years, I'd been working as a secretary at Global Tech, a big corporation downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills for my small rented apartment. Weekends were my escape. I'd throw myself into dance classes, losing myself in the rhythm and forgetting about the pile of paperwork waiting for me on Monday. It wasn't much, but it was my life, and I was content. Family, though? That was complicated. I had a younger sister, Emily, who'd always been the golden child. From the day she was born, our mother doted on her like she was made of spun sugar. Dad, well, he just fell in line with whatever Mom wanted. It was always Emily this and Emily that. I tried not to be bitter, but it was hard not to feel like a shadow in my own family. As years went by, the distance between us grew. Phone calls became less frequent, visits even more so. I'd see pictures on social media of family gatherings I wasn't invited to, Emily always front and center, beaming with our parents. It stung, but I told myself I was better off focusing on my own life. That's why I nearly dropped my phone when Mom's number flashed on my screen one Tuesday evening. I hesitated before answering, bracing myself for whatever drama might be on the other end. "Erica, it's your mother," her voice crackled through the speaker. "Hi, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Is everything okay?" "Your father wants to see you," she said, cutting straight to the chase. "Can you come to the house this weekend? Saturday at 2 p.m. Don't be late." And with that, she hung up. I stared at my phone, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. What could be so important that Dad wanted to see me after all this time? Part of me wanted to ignore the invitation, to protect myself from inevitable disappointment. But curiosity won out. I'd go, if only to find out what was going on. As I stood outside my parents' expensive home that Saturday, I took a deep breath. The house looked the same as always, a monument to my parents' success and a reminder of the life I'd never quite fit into. I rang the doorbell, half expecting no one to answer, half hoping no one would. The door swung open, and there stood my mother, her face a mask of polite indifference. "You're here," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Everyone's in the living room." Seated in the plush living room were my father, looking pale and drawn, my sister Emily, and her husband, James. The atmosphere was tense, thick with unspoken words and hidden agendas. I perched on the edge of an armchair, feeling like an outsider in my own family home. Up close, I could see how ill Dad looked. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes seemed sunken. A chill ran down my spine as I realized this wasn't just a casual family gathering. "I've got something to tell you all," Dad continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. I'm terminally ill. The doctors say I don't have much time left." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gasped, tears springing to my eyes. Despite our strained relationship, I loved my father. The thought of losing him was unbearable. "Daddy," I choked out, reaching for his hand. He squeezed mine weakly, a sad smile on his face. Emily let out a dramatic sob, burying her face in her husband's shoulder. Mom sat stone-faced, her lips pressed into a thin line. I wondered how long they'd known, how long they'd kept this from me. "There's more," Dad said, his voice growing stronger. "I've made some decisions about my will." The room fell silent. Even Emily's sobs quieted as everyone leaned in, listening intently. "Mary," Dad said, looking at Mom, "you'll get the apartment in the city." Mom nodded curtly, as if this was expected. "Emily, the house will be yours." My sister's eyes lit up, a smile breaking through her tears. Then Dad turned to me, and I saw a determination in his eyes I'd never seen before. "Erica, I've decided to leave you my savings. All of it. $800,000. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. $800,000? It was more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. But more than that, it felt like acknowledgement, a way of making up for years of being overlooked. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, all hell broke loose. Emily jumped to her feet, her face contorted with rage. "Dad, that's not fair. Erica's barely even part of this family anymore. She doesn't deserve it," Mom hissed, glaring at me as if I'd somehow orchestrated this. "John, you need to exclude her from the will. Now." I sat there, stunned, as my mother and sister railed against me. And then Dad slammed his fist on the coffee table, the sound echoing through the room. "Enough," he roared, his face flushed with anger. "This is my decision, and I won't change it." Turning to Mom, his eyes blazing, he continued, "I've been under your influence for far too long, Mary. I've neglected Erica because of you, and it ends now." The room fell silent once more. I stared at my father, seeing him in a new light. For the first time in my life, he was standing up for me. Dad turned to me then, his anger melting into sorrow. "Erica, can you ever forgive me? I've been a terrible father to you." Tears streaming down my face, I moved to him, wrapping my arms around his frail frame. "I forgive you, Dad," I whispered. "I love you." We held each other for a long moment, years of hurt and misunderstanding flowing away. When we finally separated, Dad looked exhausted. "I need to rest now," he said, slowly getting to his feet. "Erica, thank you for coming." As Dad left the room, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Mom stepped forward, her face a mask of barely contained fury. "Listen here, Erica. You need to do the right thing and give up your share of the inheritance." "No," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I won't give it up. Dad wants me to have it, and I'm respecting his wishes." Emily's face contorted with rage. She stepped closer, her finger jabbing at my chest. "You'll regret this, Erica. Mark my words." Over the next 2 weeks, my phone buzzed constantly, with messages from Mom and Emily. Each one demanded I give up the inheritance, their tone growing increasingly hostile and threatening. I ignored them all, focusing on work and my dance classes, trying to find some semblance of normalcy. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning, I got the call I'd been dreading. Dad had passed away in his sleep. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and somber faces. Mom and Emily put on a show of grief, wailing dramatically and clutching each other. I noticed Emily wearing an obscenely expensive necklace and bracelet set, the diamonds catching the light as she dabbed at her dry eyes. After the service, we gathered at the house. I watched in disgust as Emily made a show of removing her jewelry, tucking it into her purse with exaggerated care. As the last of the guests trickled out, I gathered my things, eager to escape. That's when all hell broke loose. "My jewelry!" Emily shrieked, her hands flying to her face in mock horror. "It's gone. Someone's stolen it." Mom's eyes locked onto me, her gaze accusing. Well. Isn't it convenient that the only person who's been here all day is the one who stands to gain so much? I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized what was happening. They were setting me up. "You can't be serious," I sputtered. "I didn't take anything." Emily's husband stepped forward, his voice oozing false concern. Then you won't mind showing us what's in your purse, right, Erica? I clutched my bag tighter, my mind racing. I knew I was innocent, but something told me that wouldn't matter if I opened my purse. No, I said firmly. I don't have to prove anything to you. Emily's husband pulled out his phone. Then you leave me no choice. I'm calling the police. As he dialed, I saw a triumphant smirk flash across Emily's face. In that moment, I realized just how far they were willing to go to get what they wanted. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, as two officers entered the house. Emily immediately launched into a tearful account of her stolen jewelry, painting herself as the grieving daughter, victimized on the day of her father's funeral. Officers, Emily's husband said, his voice dripping with false concern. We have reason to believe Erica may have taken the jewelry. She's refusing to show us the contents of her purse. The older of the two officers turned to me, his face impassive. Ma'am, would you mind opening your purse for us? I felt trapped, knowing that whatever happened next would not end well for me. With shaking hands, I opened my purse. The officer looked inside, and his expression hardened. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us, he said, reaching into my purse and pulling out Emily's necklace and bracelet. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. This isn't possible, I stammered. I didn't take these. I'm being set up. But my protests fell on deaf ears. Mom and Emily launched into a tirade, calling me a thief, a liar, hurling insults that cut deeper than any knife. As the officers led me out, I caught a glimpse of Emily's smug smile, hidden behind her hand as she pretended to sob. At the police station, I sat in a stark interrogation room, still in my funeral clothes, trying to make sense of what had happened. Hours passed, and then the door opened. To my surprise, it was my mother who walked in, not a police officer. She dismissed the officer standing guard, insisting on speaking to me alone. As soon as the door closed behind her, Mom's demeanor changed entirely. Gone was the grieving widow, replaced by a cold, calculating woman I barely recognized. Listen carefully, Erica, she hissed, leaning close. You have one chance to fix this mess. Give up the inheritance. Sign it over to Emily, and all of this goes away. The charges, the scandal, everything. I stared at her, disbelief warring with a growing sense of betrayal. You set me up? Your own daughter? Mom's laugh was harsh and humorless. Oh, please. You stopped being part of this family long ago. Now, you have a choice. Give up the money, or we'll make sure you go to prison. Think about it, Erica. A thief who stole from her own sister at their father's funeral? Your reputation will be ruined. You'll lose everything. I felt sick to my stomach, the full weight of their betrayal crashing down on me. No, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I won't do it. I didn't steal anything, and I won't let you blackmail me. Mom's eyes flashed with anger. You ungrateful little rat, she spat. I hope you enjoy prison. Everyone will know what you did, stealing from your own family. You'll be nothing but a criminal, a disgrace. With that, she turned on her heel and left, slamming the door behind her. I sat there, stunned, tears streaming down my face as the reality of my situation sank in. I was released on bail later that night, stumbling out of the police station into the cool night air. My phone buzzed, a message from my boss at Global Tech. My stomach dropped as I read it. Erica, I've heard some disturbing rumors. Until the situation is resolved, I think it's best you take some time off. Paid leave, of course. I believe in your innocence, but we need to protect the company's reputation. Take care. I leaned against the cold brick wall of the station, feeling my world crumbling around me. In the span of a day, I'd lost my father, been betrayed by my family, arrested, and now I was on the verge of losing my job. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. With trembling fingers, I searched online for private investigators in the area. One name stood out, Jack Reeves, a former police detective turned PI with a reputation for solving complex cases. I made the call, my voice steadier than I expected as I explained my situation. "Ms. Thompson," Jack said after I finished my story, "this is a delicate situation. Family conspiracies are never easy to prove. But if what you're saying is true, we'll find evidence. It won't be cheap, though." I thought of the inheritance I was fighting for. Money's not an issue. I need to clear my name and expose what they've done. The next 3 weeks were a blur of clandestine meetings with Jack, anxious waiting, and sleepless nights. I threw myself into my dance classes on weekends, desperate for any distraction from the constant worry. My phone remained silent, no calls from work, no more threats from my family. The silence was almost worse than the conflict. Then, one rainy afternoon, my phone rang. It was Jack. "Erica," he said, his voice grave. "I've got news, but you're not going to like it." My heart sank. "What is it, Jack?" He sighed heavily. "I've been following your mother and sister, trying to catch them discussing the inheritance or the theft. But they're careful, too careful. They never talk about it in public, and I can't legally bug their homes." I felt the last glimmer of hope fading. "So that's it? There's nothing we can do?" "Not exactly," Jack replied, a note of hesitation in his voice. "I did find something, but it's not related to your case. It's about your sister." I sat up straighter. "What about her?" "She's having an affair, Erica. I have photographic evidence of her entering a hotel with a young man, definitely not her husband. I also managed to record some of their conversations. It's not flattering to her husband, to say the least." For a moment, I sat in stunned silence. Then, slowly, a plan began to form in my mind. "Jack," I said, my voice low and determined, "I need you to send me everything you have on this. And I mean everything." As soon as I hung up, I sprang into action. I spent the next hour poring over the photos and recordings Jack sent, my mind racing with possibilities. Finally, I made a decision. I selected the most damning photo, my sister entering the hotel with her young lover, and sent it to her husband's phone with a simple message. "Interested in knowing what happened next? Meet me at Café Luna tomorrow at 2 p.m. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, my nerves on edge. At exactly 2 p.m., Emily's husband walked in, his face a mask of barely contained fury and curiosity. "What's this about, Erica?" he demanded as he sat down across from me. I took a deep breath. "I think you know, James. But what you've seen is just the tip of the iceberg." Over the next hour, I laid out everything I had. The photos, the recordings of Emily laughing about James's age, mocking his performance in bed, discussing her plans to leave him once she got her hands on the full inheritance. James sat in stunned silence, his face growing paler with each revelation. When I finished, he looked up at me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and rage. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I leaned forward. "I want justice, James. And I think you do too. Help me prove that they framed me, and we can both get what we deserve." A few days after my meeting with James, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from him, containing several audio files. My heart raced as I pressed play on the first one. Emily's voice filled the air. "Can you believe how easy it was to plant that jewelry in Erica's purse?" My mother's laughter followed. "I know. The look on her face when the police found it was priceless. Well, she'll have no choice but to give it up now." I listened to file after file, each one filled with their callous plotting and cruel laughter. A mix of vindication and disgust washed over me. Finally, I had the proof I needed. The day of the will reading arrived quickly. I entered the notary's office, my stomach in knots, but my resolve firm. Mom and Emily were already there, shooting me smug looks. James sat quietly in the corner, giving me an almost imperceptible nod. The notary, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. "Let's begin," he said, unfolding the document before him. He read through the will, detailing the distribution of assets, just as Dad had explained that day at the house. As he finished, I stood up. If I may, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, there's something I need to address before we conclude. Mom's eyes lit up, and she nodded approvingly. I'm glad you've finally come to your senses, Erica. I knew you'd make the right decision and give up the inheritance. Mom and Emily exchanged triumphant glances, their faces beaming with anticipation. But I was about to disappoint them. I'm afraid you've misunderstood, I said, pulling out my phone. I think you'll all want to hear this. I pressed play, and the room filled with their voices, gleefully discussing how they had framed me for theft. As the recording played, I watched the color drain from their faces. Emily let out a strangled gasp, while Mom sat rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line. When it ended, chaos erupted. You lying scum! Emily screeched, lunging towards me. How dare you! Mom hissed, her composure cracking. You ungrateful, scheming. I recorded those conversations. James suddenly spoke up, his voice cutting through the commotion. The room descended into madness. Emily was screaming at James, Mom was hurling insults at me, and I stood there, watching it all unfold. Silence! The notary's voice boomed, startling us all into quiet. This is a legal proceeding, not a circus. Everyone will calm down this instant, or I'll have you all removed. As the notary's words echoed through the room, a heavy silence fell. It was broken by James, who stood up abruptly, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Since we're airing dirty laundry, he said, his voice trembling with anger, I have something to add. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, slapping it down on the table in front of Emily. Emily's face drained of color as she stared at the image. It showed her entering a hotel with a man who was decidedly not her husband. I know everything, Emily, James spat. Your affair, your lies, all of it. I'm filing for divorce, and thanks to our prenup, you won't see a penny. You'll be paying me compensation for your infidelity. Emily's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no words coming out. Mom looked between Emily and James, her expression a mix of shock and dawning horror as she realized their carefully constructed world was crumbling around them. Suddenly, the door to the notary's office swung open. 2 police officers walked in, their faces stern. Mary and Emily Thompson, one of them asked, though it was clear he already knew who they were. Mom and Emily looked up, tears streaking their faces. You're under arrest for false accusations of theft and attempted blackmail, the officer continued. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As the police read them their rights and handcuffed them, I watched with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. This was justice, but it was also the final nail in the coffin of our family relationship. I walked out of the office behind the police, watching as they put Mom and Emily into separate patrol cars. As the sirens faded into the distance, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. Taking out my phone, I dialed a familiar number. Erica, my boss's voice came through, sounding concerned. Is everything all right? Better than all right, I replied, a smile in my voice. I can explain everything now. The accusations against me were false, and I have proof. I gave him a brief rundown of what had happened. As I finished, I heard him let out a low whistle. Erica, I'm so sorry you had to go through all that, he said, genuine sympathy in his voice. But I'm glad the truth came out. Listen, your job is still here whenever you're ready to come back. In fact, I'd be delighted to see you at work as soon as you feel up to it. The weeks following the confrontation at the notary's office were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and life-changing decisions. As the truth came to light, the charges against me were quickly dropped. The relief I felt was indescribable, like a weight I'd been carrying for months suddenly lifted from my shoulders. But for Mom and Emily, the nightmare was just beginning. They faced charges of false accusation and attempted blackmail. The trial was swift and damning, with the recorded evidence leaving no room for doubt. In the end, they were found guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern-faced woman with piercing eyes, looked down at them from her bench. In addition to the criminal penalties, This court orders Mary and Emily Thompson to pay substantial damages to Erica Thompson for emotional distress and damage to her reputation. The fine was staggering. Mom's face went pale as the amount was read out, while Emily burst into tears. In the days that followed, I watched from a distance as their lives unraveled. Mom, with no other choice, was forced to sell the apartment Dad had left her. It was a beautiful place in the heart of the city, but now it slipped from her grasp, the proceeds going straight to me as part of the damages. Emily's situation was even more dire. The house she'd been so smug about inheriting had to be sold to cover her part of the fine. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction as I remembered her gloating face the day Dad announced his will. But Emily's troubles didn't end there. James, true to his word, filed for divorce. He demanded the compensation outlined in their prenuptial agreement for her infidelity. What little money was left from the sale of the house went straight to him. In the span of a few short months, Mom and Emily had lost everything. Their comfortable lives, their social standing, their financial security, all of it gone. They were left with nothing but the consequences of their own actions. As for me, I found myself in a position I'd never dreamed possible. With the inheritance from Dad and the damages from Mom and Emily, I had more money than I knew what to do with. After much thought, I decided to buy a beautiful apartment in a quiet part of town. It was everything I'd ever wanted in a home, spacious, bright, and most importantly, mine. The rest of the money, I invested carefully. I spent hours researching, consulting with financial advisors, and making prudent decisions. My goal was to ensure a steady income for years to come, to build the security that I'd always longed for. As I stood in my new apartment, looking out over the city skyline, I couldn't help but reflect on the tumultuous journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the fight for justice, it had all led to this moment. I thought of Mom and Emily, now struggling to make ends meet. Part of me felt sorry for them, but a larger part knew that they were facing the consequences of their own choices. They had tried to take everything from me, and in the end, they'd lost it all themselves. My phone buzzed with a message from my boss, confirming my return to work next week. I smiled, looking forward to getting back to normal, or rather, my new normal.
Your son can wait. I'm the one who matters here, Hannah. Prioritize me or leave. Eli's words sliced through the air, sharp and cold. I stood frozen, my hands still on Caleb's feverish forehead. Our 4-year-old whimpered, his small body shivering under the blanket. He's burning up, Eli. We need to take him to the hospital. I pleaded, my voice barely above a whisper. Eli loosened his tie, his eyes fixed on his reflection in the hallway mirror. I have a crucial meeting in an hour. You can handle this yourself. My name is Hannah, and this was the moment I realized my marriage was beyond saving. I scooped Caleb into my arms, his heat seeping through my thin blouse. I'm taking him to the ER. Don't wait up. Eli's hand clamped around my wrist as I reached for the car keys. You're not going anywhere. What will people think if they see you out this late, looking like that? I yanked my arm free, anger rising in my chest. Like what, Eli? Like a mother caring for her sick child. His nostrils flared. Like a woman who can't keep her house in order. It reflects poorly on me. Mommy, Caleb whimpered, burying his face in my neck. I grabbed the keys and headed for the door. Eli's voice followed me, a low, menacing growl. If you leave now, don't bother coming back. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, Caleb clinging to me like a lifeline. I buckled him into his car seat, my hands shaking. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of Eli in the window, his face a mask of indifference. How had we come to this? The charming man I'd fallen in love with seemed like a distant memory, replaced by this cold, uncaring stranger. The hospital waiting room was a blur of fluorescent lights and worried faces. I filled out forms on autopilot, my mind racing. How long had I been ignoring the signs? The subtle put-downs, the constant criticism, the way he'd slowly isolated me from friends and family. Mrs. Walker. A nurse called my name, jolting me back to reality. We're ready to see Caleb now. As the doctor examined my son, I made a silent vow.
This ends now.
No more excuses, no more second chances. Caleb deserves better. I deserve better. My phone buzzed with a text from Eli. I expect dinner when I get home. Don't disappoint me again. I stared at the screen, a strange calm settling over me. For the first time in years, I saw our relationship with crystal clarity. This wasn't love. It was control, manipulation, and fear. Your son has a severe ear infection, the doctor explained, writing out a prescription. He'll need antibiotics and plenty of rest. I nodded, cradling Caleb close. Thank you, doctor. We'll follow your instructions carefully. As we left the hospital, the first rays of dawn were breaking over the horizon. A new day, a new beginning. I kissed Caleb's forehead, now cooler to the touch. Where are we going, Mommy? He asked sleepily. I smiled, a plan already forming in my mind. We're going on an adventure, sweetheart. Just you and me. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in far too long. Mom? It's Hannah. I need your help. As I drove towards my parents' house, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt hope. Eli had underestimated me for the last time. Now it was my turn to show him exactly what I was capable of. The morning sun filtered through the curtains as I sat at my parents' kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee. Caleb's soft snores drifted from the guest room where he slept peacefully, his fever finally broken. Mom bustled around, making breakfast, while Dad read the newspaper, occasionally glancing at me with concern. Hannah, sweetheart, Mom said, setting a plate of eggs in front of me. You need to eat something. I nodded, forcing myself to take a bite. The events of the past few days swirled in my mind, a chaotic blend of fear, anger, and an unexpected sense of liberation. Have you heard from Eli? Dad asked, his voice gruff with barely concealed anger. I shook my head. No, and I don't want to. I've blocked his number. Mom sat beside me, her hand warm on my arm. You did the right thing, Hannah. No one deserves to be treated that way. As I looked at my parents, I felt a pang of regret for the years I'd spent distancing myself from them, all to please Eli. How had I let it come to this? I remembered the day I met Eli, his charm and confidence sweeping me off my feet. He'd seemed so different then, attentive and caring. But looking back, I could see the warning signs I'd ignored, the possessiveness masked as protectiveness, the subtle put-downs disguised as jokes. I feel so stupid, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. How did I not see it sooner? Dad set down his paper, his eyes softening. You're not stupid, Hannah. Men like Eli are experts at manipulation. What matters is that you've seen the truth now. A knock at the door made us all jump. Mom went to answer it, returning with a worried expression. It's Abigail, Eli's sister. My heart raced as Abigail entered the kitchen. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually impeccable appearance disheveled. Hannah, she said, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry. I had no idea things were so bad. I stiffened, unsure of her motives. What are you doing here, Abigail? She sat down heavily, wringing her hands. Eli called me last night, ranting about how you'd kidnapped Caleb. I came to talk some sense into you, but... She trailed off, looking around the kitchen. I see now that I'm the one who needed sense talked into me. As Abigail spoke, the full weight of my situation hit me. I was a stay-at-home mom with no income of my own. Eli controlled our finances, and I had no access to our joint accounts. The realization left me breathless with panic. What am I going to do? I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. Dad leaned forward, his jaw set with determination. You're going to fight, Hannah. We'll help you get a lawyer, figure out your finances. Eli won't get away with this. Abigail nodded, a spark of determination in her eyes. I'll help too. I know things about Eli's business dealings that could be useful. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't alone in this fight. As we talked, planning our next steps, I heard Caleb calling for me. I excused myself and went to him, gathering him in my arms. Mommy, where's Daddy? He asked, his big eyes full of confusion. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Daddy and Mommy need some time apart, sweetheart. But I promise you, everything's going to be okay. As I held my son, I made a silent vow. I would build a new life for us, one free from Eli's toxic influence. It wouldn't be easy, but with my family's support and my newfound resolve, I knew we could do it. Returning to the kitchen with Caleb, I saw my parents and Abigail deep in discussion. They looked up as we entered, their faces softening at the sight of Caleb. "Ready for some breakfast, champ?" Dad asked, his voice warm. As Caleb nodded eagerly, I felt a surge of determination. This was just the beginning of our journey, but for the first time in years, I was excited about what the future might hold. The next few days passed in a blur of hushed conversations and furtive planning. I felt like a spy in my own life, carefully gathering essentials and important documents while Eli was at work. Each night, I'd lie awake, my heart racing at every creak of the house, terrified he'd discover my intentions. One afternoon, while Eli was at a crucial meeting, I seized the opportunity to call my parents. Mom answered on the second ring. "Hannah, is everything all right?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Mom, I need your help. I'm leaving Eli, and I need a place for Caleb and me to stay." There was a moment of silence, then Mom's voice came back, strong and sure. "Of course, sweetheart. You come here right away. We'll figure everything out together." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by a wave of guilt. "I'm so sorry I've kept you at arm's length all these years." "Eli, sure," Mom soothed. "None of that matters now. We're here for you, always have been." As I hung up, I heard the front door open. Panic seized me as Eli's footsteps echoed through the house. "Hannah," he called, his voice sharp. "Where are you?" I quickly composed myself and stepped into the hallway. "In here. You're home early." Eli's eyes narrowed. "The meeting was canceled. Who were you talking to?" "Just making a grocery list." I lied smoothly, surprised at how easily the deception came. "Caleb needs more of that cereal he likes." Eli grunted, seemingly satisfied. "Make sure you pick up my dry cleaning while you're out. And don't forget, we have dinner with the Johnsons tomorrow night. Wear that blue dress I bought you." I nodded meekly, all the while my mind racing with plans. Tomorrow night would be perfect. While Eli was schmoozing with his colleagues, I could make our escape. The next evening, I dressed carefully in the blue dress Eli favored, my overnight bag already packed and hidden in the trunk of my car. As we drove to the restaurant, Eli droned on about his latest business deal, oblivious to the turmoil inside me. At the restaurant, I excused myself to the restroom, my hands shaking as I dialed my dad's number. "We're ready," I whispered. "Can you meet us at the house in an hour?" Dad's voice was gruff with emotion. "We'll be there, Hannah. Stay strong." Returning to the table, I plastered on a smile and nodded along to the conversation. Inside, I was counting down the minutes. An hour later, I feigned a migraine, insisting Eli stay and entertain his guests while I went home to rest. He barely spared me a glance as I left, too engrossed in impressing his colleagues. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw my parents' car already waiting. Mom rushed to embrace me as I stepped out. "Oh, Hannah," she murmured, holding me tight. Dad was already inside, scooping a sleepy Caleb into his arms. "Let's go, sweetheart. We don't have much time." We worked quickly, loading the car with the bags I'd packed and a few of Caleb's favorite toys. As we were about to leave, I hesitated in the doorway, looking back at the house that had been my prison for so long. "Hannah," Dad said gently, "it's time to go." With a deep breath, I nodded and closed the door behind me, symbolically closing this chapter of my life. As we drove away, Caleb stirred in the back seat. "Mommy, where are we going?" I reached back to squeeze his hand. "We're going on an adventure, sweetie. Everything's going to be okay now." Looking in the rearview mirror, I saw my parents' car following close behind, a physical representation of the support I denied myself for too long. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. As we turned onto the highway, leaving our old life behind, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew with unwavering certainty that it led to a better life for Caleb and me. The first rays of sunlight crept through the curtains of my childhood bedroom, now a sanctuary for Caleb and me. It had been a week since our escape, and each morning I woke with a mixture of relief and anxiety. Today, however, a new emotion stirred within me: determination. I tiptoed past Caleb's sleeping form and made my way to the kitchen, where Mom was already brewing coffee. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, sliding a mug towards me. "Sleep well?" I nodded, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. "I think it's time I started looking for a job." Mom's eyebrows shot up. "Are you sure? There's no rush, Hannah. You and Caleb can stay here as long as you need." "I know, and I'm grateful," I said, "but I need to start building a life for us. I can't hide forever." As if on cue, Dad walked in, newspaper tucked under his arm. "I might have something for you," he said, pulling out a folded section. "The community center's looking for a part-time administrative assistant. It's not much, but it's a start." I scanned the ad, hope blooming in my chest. "This is perfect. Thank you, Dad." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I polished my resume, bought a secondhand suit from a thrift store, and practiced interview questions with Mom. All the while, I kept one eye on my phone, half expecting it to explode with angry messages from Eli. But there was nothing. The silence was almost more unnerving than his rage would have been. The morning of my interview, I stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. Gone was the meek housewife Eli had molded. In her place stood someone stronger, more determined. "You've got this," I whispered to my reflection. As I walked into the community center, my confidence wavered. It had been years since I'd worked outside the home. What if I'd forgotten how to be professional? What if they saw right through me? "Hannah Walker?" A kind-faced woman approached, hand outstretched. "I'm Sandra, the center director. Thank you for coming in." The interview flew by in a blur of questions and answers. To my surprise, I found myself speaking passionately about my desire to contribute to the community and build a better future for my son. "Well, Hannah," Sandra said as we wrapped up, "I think you'd be a great fit here. When can you start?" I blinked, stunned. "Really? I mean, I can start anytime." "Thank you so much." As I left the building, my phone buzzed. My heart leapt to my throat when I saw Eli's name on the screen. "Where the hell are you?" His voice was cold, controlled. "I've been calling for days." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I'm not coming back, Eli. Caleb and I are safe, and that's all you need to know." "You can't do this," he hissed. "I'll find you. I'll dash." I hung up, my hand shaking but my resolve firm. Quickly, I dialed Dad's number. "It's done," I said when he answered. "He knows we're gone." Dad's voice was grave. "All right, I'll call the lawyer. We'll file for divorce and a restraining order first thing tomorrow." That night, as I tucked Caleb into bed, he looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes. "Mommy, when are we going home?" My heart clenched, but I managed to smile. "We're home, sweetheart. This is our new adventure, remember?" He nodded solemnly. "I like it here. Grandma makes good cookies." I laughed, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "She sure does."
And you know what?
Mommy got a new job today. Things are going to get even better, I promise. As I closed Caleb's door, I heard Mom and Dad talking in hushed tones downstairs. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. Eli had underestimated me, thinking I'd crumble without him. But he'd forgotten one crucial thing: a mother's love is the most powerful force in the world. And I was just getting started. The doorbell's chime cut through the peaceful Saturday morning, startling me from my coffee-induced reverie. I exchanged a worried glance with Mom before approaching the door cautiously. My heart nearly stopped when I saw who was standing on the porch. Abigail, Eli's sister, stood there, her usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she clutched her purse like a lifeline. "Hannah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, torn between slamming the door and hearing her out. Curiosity won. "5 minutes," I said, stepping aside to let her in. We sat in the living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. Abigail fidgeted with her wedding ring, avoiding my gaze. Eli sent you, didn't he? I finally asked, breaking the tension. Abigail's head snapped up. Yes.
No.
It's complicated. She took a deep breath. I came to talk some sense into you, to convince you to go back. But now that I'm here, I'm not so sure anymore. I leaned forward, intrigued. What do you mean? Eli's not doing well, Hannah, Abigail confessed. He's drinking more, lashing out at work. I've never seen him like this. A part of me felt a twisted satisfaction at Eli's struggles, but I quickly pushed that feeling aside. I'm sorry to hear that, but it's not my problem anymore. Abigail nodded, her eyes filling with tears.
I know.
And I'm starting to understand why you left. The things he said, the way he's been acting, it's like I don't even know my own brother anymore. As Abigail spoke, I felt a shift in the air between us. The animosity I'd expected melted away, replaced by a tentative understanding. He's always been arrogant, Abigail continued, but lately, it's like he's spiraling. His boss called me yesterday, warning that if Eli doesn't shape up, he might lose his job. I absorbed this information, my mind racing. Eli losing his job could complicate things, especially when it came to child support for Caleb. Why are you telling me all this? I asked, genuinely curious. Abigail met my gaze, her expression a mix of guilt and determination. Because I was wrong about you, Hannah. I've always seen you as the problem in Eli's life, but now I realize it's the other way around. And I want to help. I sat back, stunned. Help?
How?
I know things about Eli's business dealings, Abigail said, lowering her voice. Things that could be useful if he tries to fight you for custody or refuses to pay support. My heart raced at the implications of her words. Are you sure about this? He's your brother. Abigail nodded firmly. I'm sure. It's time someone stood up to him, and I think you're the one to do it. As we talked, Abigail shared details about Eli's work life, his financial situation, and the growing discontent among his colleagues. Each revelation felt like a piece of armor, strengthening my resolve. When Abigail finally left, promising to keep in touch, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief at having an unexpected ally, guilt for the satisfaction I felt at Eli's struggles, and a renewed determination to build a better life for Caleb and myself. Mom appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. Everything okay, sweetheart? I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. Yeah, I think it is. Things are changing, Mom. And for once, it feels like they're changing in our favor. That night, as I tucked Caleb into bed, he asked about his father for the first time since we'd left. When will Daddy come see me? My heart clenched, but I kept my voice steady. I'm not sure, sweetie. But you know what? You and I are going to have so many adventures together. You won't even notice. As I closed Caleb's door, I felt a surge of determination. Eli had underestimated me, thinking I'd crumble without him. But with my family's support and now Abigail's unexpected alliance, I was stronger than ever. Tomorrow, I'd call my lawyer. It was time to take control of our future, once and for all. Eli's reign of emotional tyranny was over, and a new chapter was beginning, one where I held the pen. The sharp knock on the door sent a jolt through me. I knew who it was before I even reached for the handle. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself and opened the door. Eli stood there, his once immaculate appearance now disheveled. His eyes, bloodshot and wild, bore into mine with a mixture of anger and desperation. Where's my son? He demanded, pushing past me into the house. I closed the door, my heart racing but my voice steady. Caleb's at school, Eli. What are you doing here? He whirled around, his face contorted with rage. What am I doing here? You took my son and disappeared. I'm here to take you both home. This is our home now, I said, surprised by the calmness in my voice. Caleb and I aren't going anywhere with you. Eli's laugh was bitter, bordering on hysterical. You can't do this, Hannah. You're nothing without me. How do you expect to survive? I felt a surge of anger, but also pity. This man, once so powerful in my eyes, now seemed small and pathetic. I'm doing just fine, Eli. I have a job, a support system, and most importantly, I have my self-respect back. His eyes narrowed. A job? Don't make me laugh. What could you possibly do? I straightened my shoulders, meeting his gaze. I'm an administrative assistant at the community center. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work, and I'm good at it. Eli scoffed, but I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You'll come crawling back when the money runs out. You always do. Not this time, I said, my voice gaining strength. I've learned a lot about you, Eli. About your work, your finances. Abigail's been quite informative. The color drained from his face. Abigail?
What are you talking about?
I took a step closer, emboldened by his reaction. I know about the creative accounting, Eli. The offshore accounts. How long before your bosses figure it out? Eli's composure cracked. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm. You don't know what you're talking about. Let go of me, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Or I'll call the police and tell them everything. He released me as if burned, stumbling backward. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I challenged. I'm not the same woman you married, Eli. I won't be bullied or manipulated anymore. For a moment, we stood in silence, the air thick with tension. Then, something in Eli seemed to deflate. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. What happened to us, Hannah? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a twinge of sympathy, but I pushed it aside. You happened, Eli. Your arrogance, your selfishness. You forgot that a marriage, a family, is about more than just you. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I can change. We can start over. I shook my head. It's too late for that. I've moved on, and so has Caleb. We're happy here. You can't keep my son from me, Eli said, a hint of his old anger returning. I'm not, I replied. You can see Caleb, but it'll be on our terms. Supervised visits, until you prove you can be the father he deserves. Eli stood, his shoulders slumped in defeat. This isn't over, Hannah. As he reached for the door, I called out, You're right, Eli. It's not over. It's just beginning for me and Caleb. The door closed behind him, and I let out a shaky breath. I'd done it. I'd stood up to Eli, asserted my independence, and come out stronger. I walked to the window, watching Eli's car disappear down the street. A weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. My phone buzzed with a text from the school, a reminder about Caleb's upcoming parent-teacher conference. I smiled, realizing I had a life to get back to, a good life that I'd built for myself and my son. As I turned away from the window, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was stronger, more confident, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Eli's visit hadn't broken me, it had only reinforced my resolve. The future was ours to shape, and I couldn't wait to see what it held. The shrill ring of my phone cut through the peaceful morning. Abigail's name flashed on the screen, her voice urgent when I answered. Hannah, you need to turn on the news. Now. I fumbled for the remote, my heart racing as I flipped to the local channel. The headline made my breath catch. Corporate scandal rocks Eli Walker's company. The reporter's voice filled the room. In a shocking turn of events, Eli Walker, former rising star at Pinnacle Enterprises, has been fired amidst allegations of financial misconduct and embezzlement. I sank onto the couch, my mind reeling. Despite everything, a part of me ached for the man I once loved. Hannah, are you there? Abigail's voice crackled through the phone. Yes, I managed. I can't believe it. It's bad, Hannah. Really bad. The SEC is involved. Eli's facing possible criminal charges. As the reality sank in, a strange mix of emotions washed over me. Vindication, pity, and an overwhelming sense of relief. The man who had once loomed so large in my life was crumbling, his carefully constructed facade finally giving way. What happens now? I asked, more to myself than Abigail. I don't know, she replied softly. But I thought you should hear it from me first. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence, the TV still blaring in the background. The doorbell jolted me back to reality. I opened it to find my father, his face a mask of concern. "I saw the news," he said, pulling me into a hug. "Are you okay?" I nodded against his shoulder, surprised to find tears in my eyes. "I'm fine, Dad. It's just a lot to process." We sat at the kitchen table, cups of coffee growing cold between us. Dad's voice was gentle when he spoke. "You know this doesn't change anything, right? You're still better off without him." "I know," I said, meeting his gaze. "It's just hard to see someone fall so far, even if they deserve it." As the days passed, more details of Eli's downfall emerged. The arrogance that had driven me away had finally caught up with him at work. Colleagues spoke of his increasingly erratic behavior, his refusal to listen to advice, his reckless decisions that had cost the company millions. Meanwhile, my own life continued to flourish. My work at the community center had expanded, and I'd been offered a promotion to program coordinator. Caleb was thriving in his new school, making friends and excelling in his studies. One evening, as I tucked Caleb into bed, he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Mommy, why is everyone talking about Daddy on TV?" I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. "Your daddy made some mistakes at work, sweetheart. He's in trouble now, but that doesn't change how much he loves you." Caleb's brow furrowed. "Will we see him soon?" "I'm not sure," I answered honestly. "But I promise, no matter what happens, you and I will be okay." As I closed Caleb's door, my phone buzzed with a text from Eli. "Can we talk? Please." I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him face the consequences of his actions alone. But another part, the part that remembered the man I'd once loved, couldn't turn away completely. I typed a brief response. "Tomorrow. Coffee shop on Main. 2 p.m. As I hit send, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Whatever happened tomorrow, I knew I was strong enough to face it. Eli's downfall hadn't broken me. It had only reinforced the strength I'd found within myself. I walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. The future stretched before me, uncertain but full of possibility. For the first time in years, I felt truly free to shape my own destiny. Eli's twist of fate had become my opportunity for a new beginning, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. The autumn breeze rustled through the leaves as I walked Caleb to his first day of kindergarten. His little hand clutched mine tightly, a mix of excitement and nervousness radiating from him. "You're going to do great, sweetheart," I reassured him, kneeling to straighten his backpack. Caleb's eyes darted around the schoolyard, then fixed on something behind me. His face lit up. "Daddy." I turned, my heart skipping a beat as I saw Eli approaching. He looked different, humbled, the arrogance gone from his stance. His eyes met mine, a silent question in them. I nodded, giving him permission to join us. "Hey, champ," Eli said, his voice thick with emotion as he knelt beside Caleb. "Ready for your big day?" As Caleb chattered excitedly about his new school supplies, I watched Eli's face. The man before me was a far cry from the domineering husband I'd left. The past year had changed us both. After dropping Caleb off, Eli and I walked in awkward silence towards the coffee shop on the corner. "Thank you," Eli said finally, "for letting me be here today." I nodded, choosing my words carefully. "Caleb needs both of us, Eli. As long as you're committed to being a good father, I won't stand in your way." Eli's shoulders sagged with relief. "I've been going to therapy," he confessed, trying to understand why I became who I was. "I'm sorry, Hannah, for everything." The words I'd once longed to hear now washed over me without the impact I'd imagined. I realized I no longer needed his apology to move forward. "I appreciate that, Eli. I hope you find peace." We reached the coffee shop, and I checked my watch. "I need to get to work. I have a big presentation today." Eli's eyebrows raised. "The community center?" I smiled, a hint of pride in my voice. "Actually, I've been promoted to program director for the entire county. We're launching a new initiative for underprivileged youth." Surprise and admiration flickered across Eli's face. "That's incredible, Hannah. You've really found your calling." As we parted ways, I felt a sense of closure settling over me. The anger and hurt that had driven me for so long had faded, replaced by a quiet strength and self-assurance. That evening, as Caleb regaled me with stories from his first day, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Dinner tomorrow night to celebrate your presentation? Dad's grilling steaks." I smiled, typing back a quick, "Wouldn't miss it." After tucking Caleb in, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom. The woman staring back at me was a far cry from the timid housewife I'd been a year ago. My eyes were clear, my stance confident. I'd not only survived but thrived. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the pain, the fear, the moments of doubt, but also the triumph, the self-discovery, and the unwavering support of my family and friends. Eli's downfall had been a catalyst, but my rise had been entirely my own doing. I'd rebuilt my life brick by brick, creating a foundation of self-worth and independence that could weather any storm. As I climbed into bed, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The future stretched out before me, full of possibilities. I had a career I was passionate about, a son I adored, and a support system that had proven unshakable. Eli would always be a part of our lives, but no longer as the domineering force he once was. We'd found a new balance, one that put Caleb's well-being first and allowed us both to grow. I closed my eyes, a small smile playing on my lips. Tomorrow was a new day, full of promise and potential. And for the first time in years, I was excited to see what it would bring. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step. I'd discovered a strength within myself that I never knew existed, and I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As sleep began to claim me, one final thought drifted through my mind. I was no longer defined by my past or by Eli's actions. I was Hannah, mother, career woman, survivor. And my story was just beginning.
Henceforth, my brother and his wife declared, "We'll manage the household independently, so find another place to live." My mother, aligning herself with their decision, treated me as an impediment. Do they comprehend who has been footing the bills for the house? I never anticipated such disrespect. In the recesses of my mind, I resolved to take certain actions. I go by the name Carrie, a 30-year-old woman. Currently, I reside in my parents' home after returning from college. Initially, I ventured into the corporate world to forge my path, but the challenges overwhelmed me, prompting my return home. While initially navigating unemployment, I explored work-from-home opportunities. Armed with a scientific background, I embarked on a freelance engineering career. Commencing with modest projects, the income was meager, yet the experience of working independently was profoundly meaningful. In stark contrast to conventional employment, I could generate ample income without excessive social interaction. As my confidence grew, so did my workload and earnings. Within a year, my income rivaled that of a regular corporate employee. However, the predicament lay in my parents' understanding, especially my mother's reluctance to embrace my work-from-home lifestyle. My father grasped my explanation, but my mother, rooted in traditional beliefs, harbored apprehensions about what she couldn't fathom. Despite my earnest attempts to elucidate, my mother persisted with questions like, "How long do you plan on staying home?" and insinuations about the legitimacy of my online work. Despite presenting evidence of client emails and salary statements, my mother remained unconvinced. She suspected it to be some shady business or involvement in a dubious religion, despite the consistent payments and the legitimacy of my job. Despite my detailed explanations, my mother remained steadfast in her skepticism. She continually expressed concerns about the possibility of relying on unemployment benefits, emphasizing their impermanence. Although I had contemplated living independently, my savings were not yet sufficient. Around that time, my father's health took a toll, with deteriorating legs and back, necessitating nursing care. Facing an early retirement and sudden income loss, my father assured me that his pension would suffice. However, Acknowledging my mother's spending habits, I questioned his ability to manage. His face wore the fatigue of anxiety about the uncertain future. My father had supported me through college and even when I returned home due to mental health challenges. The idea of leaving him alone and continuing to live independently troubled me. My mother, too, grappled with confusion over my father's sudden condition. Contemplating the situation, I felt a sense of responsibility and a desire to give back. Reassuring my father, I pledged to support the family from that point onward. He expressed surprise, doubting my income's adequacy, but I confidently showed him my stable financial situation. Grasping the reality, my father, who had always understood my circumstances, was taken aback by my newfound stability. Encouraged by his understanding, I offered to help with household expenses, medical bills, and other financial obligations. Each month, I transferred a certain amount to my father's bank account, shouldering a significant part of the financial burden. As my mother had been using my father's credit card, I created a new main card and provided her with a supplementary card. My father, mindful of saving money, urged my mother to follow suit. In response, my mother questioned whether I should be asked to leave the house. I pointed out my financial contributions and emphasized that it would be more challenging without my support. Skeptical, my mother remained unconvinced and suspicious of my assistance. It took my father's persuasion to finally gain her agreement, allowing me to continue living with them. Continuing my work and household responsibilities, I found my mother increasingly taking my assistance for granted. Her strictness intensified, with constant remarks about the speed of my chores. "Can't you finish your chores faster?" she would complain. I explained the challenge of multitasking while working, but she dismissed my concerns. The strain on my relationship with her became apparent, and it seemed irreparable. In contrast, my father, understanding my efforts, provided much-needed support. Despite this strained dynamic, we persevered in this manner for a year. After a year, my father's health took a sudden downturn, requiring hospitalization. Visiting him daily, I shared moments of concern and reassurance. Aware of the strain on me, my father expressed gratitude, acknowledging the difficulties in my relationship with my mother. As my father grappled with health issues, the already strained relationship between my mother and me deteriorated further. Despite feeling suffocated at times, I remained committed to supporting my family. Recollections of my mother's past efforts, especially during my student days, kept me steadfast in this commitment. However, a significant shift occurred when my mother welcomed my brother Kevin and his wife Mary. Their unexpected arrival brought an abrupt change to my living situation. My brother explained their decision, stating they would be living in the house from now on to ease the burden on me. I was taken aback, and my mother seemed to avoid eye contact. While my brother and his wife claimed their intention was to support me, a hidden meaning lingered in their words. My mother, expressing gratitude, subtly hinted at my need to contribute more to the household. Despite the surprise, I learned that my brother, a graduate of a prestigious college, had joined a reputable company. The unexpected turn of events left me questioning the true motives behind my brother and his wife's presence in our home. Certainly, he must have been earning a substantial salary, but I too was diligently pursuing my own endeavors. I wondered if they could manage without my contributions. Transitioning into a new life at home with my brother and his wife proved to be more demanding than anticipated. "Wake up, Perry, make breakfast," my brother's wife hollered, banging on my door. Fully awake and already engrossed in my work as a morning person, I explained that I was already up and working. Despite my work commitments, they insisted that I prepare breakfast. "Get on with it and get breakfast ready," she demanded. I reluctantly forced myself to assist, considering our family's usual morning freedom. Typically, we enjoyed meals at our own pace, especially when my mother and brother's wife were present. I presumed it was customary for the wife to prepare breakfast for her husband. However, my sister-in-law insisted on cooperation, and I reluctantly joined them in the kitchen. Despite my efforts, their dissatisfaction was evident. "Is this what you prepared for breakfast?" "This isn't enough," they complained. I had meticulously crafted a breakfast plate featuring soft scrambled eggs, a refreshing lettuce salad, fresh buttered toast, and a succulent sausage, thinking it would be well received. However, it seemed I had missed something. "You don't have to eat it," I retorted. But their surprise was palpable. Their reaction turned confrontational, questioning my attitude and who I thought I was. My brother, often condescending, mocked me, likely influenced by our mother. Despite explaining my work commitments, they dismissed it. "What kind of work is that? Are you crazy?" they exclaimed. Frustrated by their lack of understanding and the impact on my work, I packed my laptop, ignored their protests, and left the house. As I departed, my brother's voice echoed in the background, demanding to know where I was going. Ignoring the question, I proceeded to my father's hospital room. As I hurried into my father's hospital room, his surprised gaze met mine. "Carrie, what's wrong?" "You seem flustered," he observed. I recounted the recent incident, and my father, wearing a surprised expression, responded, "I didn't know they were. I'm sorry, Carrie. Don't worry about it. You can choose your own way of life." Feeling lost, I expressed concern that my mother might feel more comfortable if my brother Kevin were at home. However, my father reassured me, "You don't need to be in a place where you don't feel comfortable. All I want is for you to live happily. Live your life the way you want to live." Encouraged by my father's words, I decided to leave home. Upon returning that evening, I encountered a tense scene resembling a movie. The serious faces of my mother, brother, and sister-in-law greeted me. My brother accused me of not being at work, forcing him to take the day off. I inwardly questioned the responsibility of easily taking time off work. Their voices escalated, culminating in my brother demanding, "Get out of here. From now on, the three of us will live together. If you don't want to stay, please leave. We don't need an overbearing presence like you to support us." It was a shocking statement, and I replied in surprise, "Why?" Ignoring my protests, my brother and his wife insisted on my departure, declaring that I was no longer needed in the absence of our father. My mother, aligning with their sentiments, regarded me as a hindrance. The frustration intensified as they dismissed my involvement in the family's finances and prioritized their own concerns. Enraged by their insensitivity, I devised a plan. Initially, I transferred the money linked to the credit card my mother used daily to another account under my management. This subtle move aimed to surprise my mother when she could no longer access her credit card. I initiated a money transfer from my father's account, a crucial pillar supporting the family's financial stability. However, I ensured that only my father's medical expenses could be withdrawn from this separate account, unbeknownst to my mother. Consequently, a significant financial burden now rested on my brother and his wife. Though unaware of the intricate details of my brother's income, I was certain that he would feel the weight more than ever. After completing the necessary formalities, I gathered my belongings and declared my departure, saying, "I'm leaving this place." To my surprise, my mother, brother, and sister-in-law, who had been relentlessly harassing me, looked taken aback. Their astonishment revealed that they hadn't anticipated my decisive action, although, from the expressions on their faces, it seemed they were secretly enjoying the moment. As I announced my departure, they belittled me, expressing their relief. "You're finally leaving. We've never dealt with such a troublesome person. You're not coming back, are you?" In response, I asserted, "Of course not. Don't contact me." They smiled as I left the house, but I couldn't help but wonder what they would think after I had left. Embarking on a new life in a tranquil environment, I found solace and the freedom to enjoy my own time. Refreshed and focused, I immersed myself in my work. However, as expected, a call from my brother disrupted the peace. "I told you not to contact me. What's wrong?" I questioned. His voice conveyed surprise and urgency as he inquired about my involvement in the family's financial transactions. Confirming my role, I reminded him that I had mentioned my work several times, but neither he nor our mother had believed me. Expressing confusion, he admitted, "Well, Mom said a lot of things, and I was a little confused." Acknowledging that it wasn't my fault, he revealed a financial predicament. With my absence, they struggled to manage expenses, and my mother's spending had exacerbated the situation. Though sympathetic, I asserted, "I was able to support you in many ways because I was at home. I'm not there anymore, so you have to handle it, Carrie." I found myself in an unexpected situation when my brother contacted me, urgently requesting assistance in transferring money to his bank account. Perplexed, I asked if he was joking, given that he worked for a sizable company. However, to my surprise, my brother confessed that he had been fired from his job due to a significant mistake. His revelation left me speechless, and I realized that he might have returned to our parents' house assuming there was enough money available. Perhaps he relied on the notion of a stable pension following our father's retirement. Wanting to enlighten my brother about my financial contributions to the household, I found amusement in the thought of his astonishment upon learning the truth. His wife and my mother joined the plea for financial aid, claiming they were on the verge of running out of savings. My mother even revealed that my father refused to contribute to household finances any longer. In response, I firmly declared that I had supported them enough, urging them to work hard and support themselves. I severed communication, emphasizing my decision to distance myself from their financial struggles. My father, recognizing the strain in his relationship with my mother, consulted a lawyer and opted for a quieter life in a different place. While I continued to visit my father daily, a friend shared my brother's recent struggles. He had moved into a modest apartment, leading a frugal life. My mother, once a homemaker, faced challenges in her sudden job, while my brother found it difficult to adapt to the opinions of younger colleagues. Despite his wife's efforts, she succumbed to the pressure and departed, leaving my brother and mother to navigate their challenges together. Concerns lingered for my mother, who maintained her habit of overspending, accumulating debts. However, I recognized my limitations in offering assistance. Focused on my own endeavors, I worked diligently in a comfortable living space, gradually accruing more resources. Contemplating new ventures, I aimed to spend quality time with my cheerful father, appreciating every moment with him.